For GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Boris Johnson hits back after he's once again reported to police over alleged lockdown breaches.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the 24th of May. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Leading our news on this Wednesday morning, Boris Johnson threatens to sue the government after it referred him to police over allegations he once again broke lockdown rules. Investigators are looking into potential breaches at Downing Street and Chequers.
Serious questions for South Wales police in the wake of riots in Cardiff that followed a crash which killed two teenage boys. Despite officers saying none of their vehicles were present at the time, CCTV from the area appears to show police following the boys minutes before.
The Prime Minister has warned uncontrolled legal migration is leading to unmanageable pressure on public services. Writing in the Telegraph newspaper, Rishi Sunak says he's committed to bringing down immigration that is too high and too fast.
And German prosecutors have confirmed the renewed search for Madeleine McCann at a Portuguese reservoir is due to a tip-off. Sources close to the investigation say police are looking for the pink pyjamas she was wearing the night she vanished.
So here we are, mellow yellow for both of us this morning.
Totally unplanned, by the way.
Totally unplanned, totally unplanned.
Just, in sync.
Just spiritually connected.
There we go.
GBViews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet us at GBNews as well. Top story this morning, Boris Johnson has once again been reported to police by civil servants over fresh allegations he breached lockdown guidelines.
Here we go again. Thames Valley Police and Scotland Yard have confirmed they're looking into potential breaches at both Chequers and Downing Street.
Now, he's said to be considering suing the government over the move, with his team calling the referral politically motivated. The thoughts now of Deputy Editor for Spiked, Fraser Myers. This all becomes quite Trump-esque. It's politically motivated. Right, does this surprise you? Are we not over all of this? I thought we'd seen this dead and buried.
Well, yeah, it's Partygate part
10,000 and something. You know, this has to be this scandal of Boris Johnson breaking lockdown has probably been investigated more than any violent crime. You know, every aspect of it picked over for years and years. We've had a previous police inquiry. We had the Sue Gray inquiry. We've got the ongoing Privileges Committee inquiry, which has already been going on for over a year investigating him. And now there's these new revelations of we don't know whether he's broken the rules. He insists.
No, I've forgotten. He has been found, though, of breaking the law before on this front.
He was fined, wasn't he, by police?
Right. So what's this going to achieve? We know he's a lawbreaker then. Is he just going to be fined again, or...?
Well, you know, yeah, exactly. All of us have pretty much made up our minds over what we think. We've seen the pictures of the Union Jack cake and the warm tins of Estrella. I mean, potentially he could be fined again. I think that the reason Boris would say this is political is it would be an attempt to stop his comeback in his tracks. I don't know whether his comeback is as realistic as he might think. I'm not sure there's millions of people saying bring back Boris, but maybe in his head there are. You know, the timing is curious. About a month before the Privileges Committee is going to wrap up its investigation, which would decide whether how long he's going to be suspended for. If he's suspended for more than 10 days, then he would have to fight a by-election, and I think he'd likely bow out at that point.
It sounds like you don't think it is a very serious story.
Well, it's hard to tell. I mean, you know, you listen to Boris's defence and he says these were sort of work meetings, but we have also heard that line before.
I think what's curious about it was his lawyers who were helping him prepare for the COVID inquiry that then highlighted these diary entries may have been against the law.
So they highlighted them to the Cabinet Office, and then the Cabinet Office highlighted them to the police without letting Boris know, and that is where the sort of tension has arisen. Boris is accusing the Cabinet Office of being politically motivated.
And I suppose there's lots of questions then about, gosh, how come taxpayers' money still being spent on lawyers for Boris Johnson preparing for the COVID inquiry?
Well, the Cabinet Office and the taxpayers are paying for everyone's lawyers, essentially. Anyone who is involved in the government to make sure that they have representation in that inquiry. I mean, God knows how long the inquiry is going to go on and when it'll even start, you know.
I do think, you know, I mean, if he's a rascal and he's a lawbreaker, and if he was, you know, setting policy for everybody else to follow and not following it himself, right, bang, let's get to the point, and I think we accept all of that. But what I accept is if my home was broken into last night, I would find it very hard to get police officers to turn up and investigate and try and catch the robbers. I mean, really, do we not just know where we're at with this and let's move on?
Yeah, and he's resigned as Prime Minister effectively over this, right? I mean, you know, it has had its impact. And as you say, you know, it's bizarre that the police are interested in this, and it's not just that Boris Johnson they're interested in. COVID fines and prosecutions are still ongoing. Last week in Hampshire, there were 6 people arrested simply because some of them filled in their forms wrong, you know, when they during periods of travel restrictions. There's been a taxi driver recently, only in the past couple of weeks, who was just fined £5,000 because he travelled via a red list country and didn't know he had to book a quarantine hotel. So the police are still pursuing these COVID breaches quite vigorously, and, you know, people's lives are being ruined as a result. That is, to me, is a much bigger scandal. That's something that we should be talking about. We should have an amnesty.
Yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of public would you know, question why that's still going on. But what's the public mood, do you think, in terms of, you know, if the Privileges Committee come back and say that Boris Johnson either knowingly or recklessly misled Parliament? That is important. We need to get to the bottom of that.
Well, it's very serious, of course. But I think, you know, I think a lot of people probably haven't been following the ins and outs of what's the difference between the Privileges Committee and the Sue Gray Committee and the police investigation. Everyone has made up their minds that he broke the rules because he did. You know, whether he misled Parliament about it, I think is a separate question that probably doesn't play on most people's minds.
Fraser Myers from Spiked, thank you very much indeed. Listen, Fraser, we'll hear from you again later in the programme. So if anybody's got anything to say or agree, disagree, or question for Fraser, let us know. Get in touch the usual way, which is... What is
GBNews at GBNews GBNews.com.
The very thing. Somebody get a notice pinned to that camera for us, will you?
We need Tom in here.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you something which is very serious and needs a lot of explanation is what happened in Cardiff a couple of nights ago. South Wales police are facing serious questions in the wake of the riots that followed a crash that killed 2 teenagers.
Yeah, officers originally said none of their vehicles were on the road at the time, but CCTV appeared to contradict that. It showed a police van following the boys on e-bikes just minutes before the crash. OK, well, let's now speak to the policing and crime commentator, Danny Shaw, on this one. On the face of what we're seeing, Danny, the video of the police van behind this e-bike, it does seem there are questions to be asked, particularly if Cardiff Police said we had no vehicles on the road at that time in that area.
Good morning, Eamonn. Good morning, Isabel. I think, look, let's be absolutely clear what this is. Firstly, the disorder that happened, the riots that happened was absolutely appalling. And the only people who were to blame for that, the people who carried out the rioting, there were a number of police officers who were taken to hospital as a result of that. That's really serious, and there can't be any excuse for that. And I think that has to be made absolutely clear. And a number of politicians have made that clear. But the police clearly have some questions to answer. That is one reason why they have made a referral to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. That's the police watchdog. When someone dies as a result of or following contact with the police, or where police have been involved in some incident that is so serious that there's a mandatory referral to the IOPC. So that's not surprising in this case. The question here is whether or not there was a mistake made by police in saying that there were no police vehicles at the time, or whether it was a deliberate attempt to mislead. I find that very, very hard to think that would be the case.
Danny, without a doubt, there's huge anger that led to those riots. So how are we piecing this together? Is the suggestion that the e-scooter was being chased, went out of control, hit the other cars? We need to build up this picture as to actually what appears to have incited so many young people in that area.
Well, of course, and that's exactly what the Independent Office for Police Conduct will do as part of their investigation. And the police will also be doing that as well to establish more details about the e-scooter and the 2 boys who tragically died. But there is a difference, Eamonn, between a police van following an e-scooter, a bike, or whatever vehicle it is, and a pursuit. There may not be a difference for most people, but there is in police terminology. There is a pursuit is where police deliberately target a particular vehicle and follow it, pursue it, and there are certain rules and regulations around that. Following a vehicle may just mean that the police have seen something suspicious and decided to sort of follow it at a distance. We just don't know at the moment, and there may be a confusion with the terminology. And there's also a difference in that the police have clearly stated that the road on which the e-scooter crashed and the 2 boys tragically lost their lives, there were no police vehicles on that road at that time. That's not the same as the road where this police van was spotted. So there are some differences and some nuances, and it also remains to be seen whether the rumours that swirled around on social media were actually sort of to blame for what happened, because these things don't come out of nowhere. And it may well be that there are some other tensions, some other issues in that area at the time that were building that also contributed to all this.
Yeah, it's interesting you say, whether it was accidental or deliberate, the sort of failure of the police to say there was any sort of presence at the time of the crash for 24 hours. That will all, be got into and the basis of it. But the point, I suppose, will be whether or not, the slowness of their reaction and actually precipitated the anger that broke down the trust with the public and was it all preventable, essentially, these riots? They'd just come out and said, you know, we were following them. This is the reason why. And the families are absolutely furious. The parents of Kyrie Sullivan, who was 16, and Harvey Evans, they say that A, their boys were chased, and B, that their boys were then left on the road for hours because all of this ire was being directed at the emergency services who couldn't then tend to them.
Well, I think all of that has to be looked at in a calm way as part of an investigation. And of course, people want answers, and they want answers now. But sometimes investigations take a bit of time. There do appear to be, at the moment, some serious questions about police communications, what was said, and what was said at the scene, and how people were kept away from the scene, and what information they were given. Certainly, you know, if we go back a number of weeks, police communications have been found wanting in other cases, but you know, I think it's really, really, you have to be careful not to rush to judgment in cases like this because we don't know all the facts, and that has to be established. And I'm afraid if you do rush to judgment, that can actually make things worse rather than better. But, you know, on the face of it, clearly, the South Wales Police have a number of questions to answer.
Condolences, of course, and thoughts with the family of those two young boys. Danny Shaw, he is the crime and policing commentator, speaking to us from North London today about that situation in Cardiff 2 nights ago. Thanks, Danny. Appreciate it.
Now to Portugal. German prosecutors have confirmed that the search for Madeleine McCann at a reservoir is following a key tip-off.
Sources close to the investigation say police are looking for the pink pyjamas she was wearing the night she vanished.
Well, today, specialist teams are preparing to mount a second full day of search activity as our Home and Security editor, Mark White, reports from the Algarve.
On the edge of this reservoir, 30 miles from the resort where Madeleine McCann disappeared, there is now intense search activity. An operation acting on fresh intelligence, enough to convince investigators the area could hold the key to helping solve this 16-year-old mystery. Using ground-penetrating radar and specialist sniffer dogs, search teams concentrated on this relatively small and very isolated area. It's a spot where Christian Bruckner, the prime suspect in Madeleine's abduction, visited on a regular basis. He lived for a time in a commune just 7 miles from here. This search operation is being conducted by the Portuguese police, but at the instigation of the German authorities. Germany's chief prosecutor, who's investigating Christian Bruckner, says he has compelling evidence that he not only abducted, but murdered Madeleine McCann. German authorities have never detailed that evidence. But almost a decade on from the last major search on the Algarve, it's taken them back here with a renewed determination. The German chief prosecutor confirming that a detailed tip-off had brought about this latest operation. Although Christian Bruckner's defence team have continually called into question the evidence against the convicted rapist, the lead prosecutor is a highly respected figure within German law enforcement. A small number of Scotland Yard detectives are here in Portugal monitoring the progress of these searches, relaying anything of note back to Madeleine McCann's family in the UK. Mark White, GB News at the Arad Dam on the Algarve.
With the time at exactly 16 minutes past 6, let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
A woman has died after being hit by a motorcycle that was part of the Duchess of Edinburgh's police escort. 81-year-old great-grandmother Helen Holland was struck in London on the 10th of May, but died after sustaining irreversible damage to her brain.
Bank of England says it needs to learn big lessons after they failed to predict the UK's inflation surge. The Governor, Andrew Bailey, says further interest rate increases would be needed if inflationary pressure continues. And we will have the latest inflation numbers just after 7 o'clock as they are announced.
There are new calls for baby food and drink guidelines over concerns about the amount of sugar infants are consuming from popular shop-bought products. Action on Sugar, along with 16 other groups, have signed an open letter to the Health Secretary, urging him to ensure that all food and drink products marketed to babies are nutritionally appropriate.
Sugar is a word that a lot of people can't say. I was listening to radio today and it was repeatedly irritating that the reporter kept saying, sugar, sugar,
Sugar.
sugar. And my wife puts an H in sugar, which is not there. Sugar.
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 It shouldn't be there
Do you
anyway.
not have people coming up to me in the street and saying, I love the way Eamonn says Nottingham?
Nottingham, what's wrong?
Well, you know, I've gone on about it so much in this programme. Now it's got people talking. It's become like a hashtag. Eamonn Holmes, hashtag Nottingham.
Nottingham?
Nottingham.
The sheriff of Nottingham.
Can you say Birmingham?
Birmingham.
Birmingham. I think it's the ING. It's lovely the way the Northern Irish say it. Anyway, enough about that.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about Meghan Markle. She appears to skip an awards ceremony last night. We're asking, why is this to do with the chase, or so-called chase, in New York last week? She was due to receive an accolade for her podcast. We'll be getting the latest from LA after this.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians
That's right.
as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
6:20 on a Wednesday, still to come this morning. You know, I'm like that because we're so gay looking.
We're so bonny and gay.
We're so...
Sunshine. It's a bit much, probably, with the background.
Yeah.
Probably blinding you. We were inspired by Norman Baker yesterday.
His yellow
He was in his
jacket.
fluorescent.
And he's a Lib Dem.
Oh, gosh, do we look like we're
Two Lib Demers.
political this morning?
OK, well, as the Prime Minister warns of the strain migration, uncontrolled migration, puts on all our services, we're going to look back at how the UK found itself in this situation and how's it going to get out of it.
And are you on TikTok, Eamonn? Are you on TikTok?
No.
Well, I'm not either, but after a TikTok
But apparently I'm all over TikTok.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
but
my
I don't
taxi
know.
driver was telling me
I don't really know
that
what
this morning.
TikTok does. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
I understand what Instagram does. I understand what Twitter does. I understand what Facebook does. But I'm just not sure.
TikTok's all videos, and anyway...
Would I have to appear naked on that?
No, that'd be
like,
a whole different
Would that be
forum.
OnlyFans?
I don't know, it'd be some kind of unique niche website.
So if I sort of sat in my underpants...
Amen.
No, but I'm saying, could I make money off that?
I don't know.
What?
You can. Charlie says you can make money off that.
Charlie would know.
Yeah, he would know.
He probably sits in his underpants.
Oh, I don't want to think about that.
I know that.
After a TikTok user was arrested on Monday for entering strangers' homes uninvited.
What?
We are debating at 7:20 if the app is actually encouraging young people into bad behaviour.
Oh dear, like sitting in your underpants.
No, that's a different website.
Oh, right.
But, you know, we had that whole thing, didn't we, with schools, where they were all storming out of schools over the toilet situation, and TikTok was kind of the forum that was spreading that. And now people are breaking and entering because they're just trying to, the bar just keeps getting set higher and higher for amusing content.
So it's amusing. They break into your house,
think
they
it's
film
amusing.
themselves, and that's supposed to be amusing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
I tell you what would be
7:20.
amusing then,
What?
showing somebody coming downstairs with a golf club.
That'd be you.
That would be me, yeah. I wouldn't even bother reporting them to the police. You just want a baseball bat or a golf club. What's the point reporting them to the police?
Oh my gosh.
You just get the
Eamonn
satisfaction out of
Unfiltered.
whacking them. But you would. I bet you most people agree with me. If someone breaks into your house, what satisfaction would you get?
Yes, but
welting them.
I've been
with
on
a club?
self-safety courses, you know, on what to do if someone breaks into your house and you don't confront the intruder.
No, you
get
do.
out the back door and you call the... No, because
Tell
you don't know if they've got knives, if they're on drugs.
You could not listen. I grew up in Northern Ireland, and the thing is, if someone puts a gun to your head or whatever and says, "Shut up, get into that car," the last thing you do is shut up and get into that car.
I'll be shutting up and getting into the car.
I wouldn't. You create a big fuss. And anyway, would you strike someone if they came into your home?
Or would you go out the back door? Let us know your
It's quite a
views.
scary thing. I mean, I think it's ridiculous that somebody can break into your house and get away with it, and people don't take into account the stress and strain that it puts in people's heart.
Oh, I know, yes.
You know, the scariness of it all.
Exactly.
Okay.
So let us know your thoughts on this. GBViews at gbnews.com. Keep them unfiltered, just like Eamonn's.
Dear God, we're talking about Meghan Markle now, okay? So, she gets chased around New York for 2 hours last week, whatever, and last night she didn't turn up at an awards ceremony because she thinks, well, the theory is that she was worried about being chased by paparazzi again. Well, I don't know. Let's see if someone who does know. Let's go to Kinsey Schofield. These are the Gracie Awards. What was she getting this award for, Miss Kinsey?
This was a digital media national winner of she's the digital media national winner for archetypes, and she was on page like 5 of the pamphlet announcing all of the winners. So there is a theory circulating on Twitter that she just wasn't relevant enough. She just wasn't going to be the center of attention, and maybe that's why she turned, you know, the actual showing up to the Gracies down. I think there are multiple reasons. Christina Applegate was one of the women that were going to be, you know, celebrated that evening. Did she want to bring up, you know, Thomas Markle, who Christina Applegate worked with for years on Married with Children? Meghan has talked about how she grew up on the set of Married with Children. Does she want to bring up conversations about that side of her family? You know, we've also have the car chase. We've got Prince Harry being denied the ability to pay for private security when he's in the UK. They could be very upset about that and likely are. And then also, Eamonn and Isabel, don't forget, over the last few weeks, there have been, you know, horrible rumors about the current status of their relationship. So could they be overwhelmed right now? I imagine the answer is likely yes.
So what do you mean? Spread some more horrible rumours for us. What do you mean over the status of their relationship? Is the theory that they're going to split?
Okay, Eamonn, so the Telegraph reported recently that Harry had 2 different hotels that he escaped to when he just needed, some fresh air. He goes and works out in Beverly Hills at Billy's Boot Camp, which is this very chic Hollywood, this where all the celebrities go. And then he's got apparently this private little bungalow that he goes to just for an escape from
Prince
the
Philip
family.
used to do.
Now, Harry and Meghan have said this.
I'll set you off.
Prince Philip used to have a private little bungalow bungalow.
Wood Farm, wasn't it? There's precedent for that.
Oh, dear.
That was Camilla Tominey writing that piece in the
I wish
Telegraph.
we all had such a luxury. Harry and Meghan have pushed back on these rumors, but they also denied that they helped write Finding Freedom. So, we're careful about what we believe.
Say,
what would you like to say? In the interest of balance, here comes Isabel.
No. All I would say, any relationship that has someone who's got clear problems in relation to the death of their mum, and whether or not that was a car chase or not, he obviously, whether it was deluded or not, was traumatised by that. Then the backlash when everyone says you're a liar, losing these cases, having a stalker outside your house. Any couple would be tense in that situation. Plus, throw in two little terrorists, as Michelle Obama would describe them, as in your children.
Any couple would then hire a hotel room or a little bungalow to escape off to. No, they wouldn't.
Extreme amount of pressure.
Listen, all this crud she talks, and she got this award. I mean, any of us could do her podcast. Be the best version of you. Always believe and you can achieve.
You're absolutely right, because there's another woman that actually did the majority of her interviews. A producer actually does the majority of Meghan's interviews, and they drop her vocals over it. So she could have sent the producer that did most of the work to accept the award.
Have you ever had your vocals dropped?
No, have you?
No, but that's amazing. That's incredible to hear that.
Oh dear, the story, it just never goes away, does it?
Look, do you know what she is? And she'll hate this. I think she's a comedy character. I think she's a caricature, a comedy character. I think when you see her receiving awards and talking about all this rubbish that she talks, I mean, honestly, it's laughable. It is laughable.
Well, I think it depends on how she says the word sugar, because obviously you have an opinion on that.
How do you say it?
Sugar.
Sugar,
like a sweet Southern belle. I love it.
Very good. But your sweetness and light, you are
sugar.
You are living sugar. You are. Yeah. What's that song that
I'm
Harry
never
Styles
leaving.
has?
Oh, watermelon.
Sugar.
Yeah,
Sweet watermelon.
Yeah.
And then there's the Rolling Stones.
I don't know where we're going.
The Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
Brown Sugar,
yeah.
Didn't they have that as well?
Don't go there.
Is that banned now?
I don't know. I just want to end this interview. Nothing against you, Kinsey. Sometimes I wish there was a mute button for this guy.
So basically, Miss Meghan is lost. She was supposed to be, you see, if this was a normal person, we would have the police out looking for her. She was supposed to turn up last night. She hasn't turned up. And everybody's worried about where she is. And meanwhile, Harry's in a bungalow somewhere else because he's stressed out. So
don't be jealous. I know that was.
You know what? I am one of her neighbors, sort of, about 2 hours away. I can make some missing person posters if you guys are really that concerned.
Oh.
Okay. Well, when she turns up, or if she turns up, let us know. Okay.
Thank you. You got it. You'll be first to know.
Thank you, Kinsey.
Bye, Kinsey.
Thank you very much indeed.
Oh,
Meghan Markle is lost. If anybody finds her, if you're
Please don't let us know.
If you're paparazzi searching for her, let us know where she is.
Oh.
And remember, you can be the best version of you if you want to be. You can take on the world. You can be whoever you want to be. Anyway, 6:30.
Yes, stay with us. We'll be discussing the fresh accusations that Boris Johnson broke lockdown rules. David Mellett, Scarlett Maguire with their take in just a moment.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Everyone stop encouraging him. Dave in Southampton, hit them all day long with a bat.
These are burglars who break into your house.
Steve, oh yeah, not Harry and Meghan. Stephen Solihull, I'm with Eamonn all the way. Baseball bat's the best way to go. Richard says, I'm with Eamonn, beat their butt.
Beat their butt. That should be
Keith,
the theme
I'm with
of the
Eamonn.
day.
Anyone breaking into my house, better watch out.
Yeah, well, if you don't die of a heart attack with the shock of it all, but it's good. Here to review the newspapers this morning, we've got Scarlett Maguire and we've got David Miller dressed as Wolverine. This morning.
Listen, if you're not careful...
What's going on with the hair today?
I'll beat your butt.
What did you do? What's your thinking behind the hair today?
I quite like it. It's sort of slicked back.
I like a little different look, you know?
Yeah.
It just hasn't been trimmed for a while.
I think I forgot to comb it, actually. Or maybe it's not properly dried. You know, I wash my hair every day, as I'm sure you do.
Oh, absolutely. I have to. I don't know why. I don't understand people.
We old guys have got to try and keep there, you know? Yeah.
But that's not a wig. No, that's real.
No, that's real. You can have a tug.
Very stylish, very bohemian.
Well, let's talk about someone else with very famous hair.
Yes.
David, let's talk Boris Johnson, front of most of the papers, frankly, this morning. The Telegraph talking about these latest allegations.
Yeah. OK, now look, I'm not usually one of the world's biggest fans of Boris Johnson, OK? But I feel sorry for him over this. I just think it's pretty outrageous that all these months after... I mean, when is this nonsense going to end? You know, the police can't catch murderers, but apparently they can catch people who went down to Chequers and maybe had a drink they shouldn't have had. I don't approve of the way Boris Johnson conducted himself during lockdown. But, you know, you can have too much of a good /bad thing. And this is just going on too long. Do you know what I think is awful?
What?
I mean, I defend officials. You know, and I spent 11 years as a minister, and I never had a row with officials. No one ever reported me for bullying. And, you know, it was fine. But the idea that officials can go through a diary and then, without telling you, report you to the police, I'm sorry, but I get off the bus at this point.
No, I think you're completely wrong, actually. So the official...
Good, that's what you're here to do.
Absolutely, David.
Yeah.
No, so what happened was that they looked at all these appointments and they saw that time after time, Boris Johnson was just breaking the rules, and all of us were supposed to not see anybody, and he was having people to Chequers, people to the Downing Street flat. I mean, we know that over Christmas, right, he had Nimco Ali, and he said, oh, you know,
Is that a disease?
This is a woman who's a friend of Carrie's, and who was at the time, I think, the Women Against Violence thing. That she's now resigned because she doesn't like the present Home Secretary, but she was in there over Christmas, and he said, "Oh, we're in a childcare bubble," and you think, no, you're in a childcare bubble with Carrie's mother. I mean, basically, the thing about Boris Johnson is he's never liked obeying the rules, and he didn't do it during COVID, and he was Prime Minister.
Yes, I suppose the point is, we already knew he broke rules. What's new, kind of thing. But I suppose the answer to that is we still haven't got to the bottom of whether he knowingly or recklessly misled Parliament, and that has to be important. I mean, if the Prime Minister is lying to Parliament, then that's, you know, then what kind of country are we?
But this is just, you know, if
this isn't. This is time after time.
Crime-free, and you had to give the police something to do because they were otherwise sitting around scratching their backsides. But the reality is, this country is awash with crime. it's not properly investigated by the police 9 times out of 10. So what are responsible people doing?
David, you used to be a minister. You know that the police who are investigating burglaries are not going to be the police who are looking at this. And all they're going to do is they're going to look at this and they're going to say, well, you know, if he had these people, then he broke the rules. I mean, you don't have to do a big investigation.
So we know he's already broken the rules, but do you think this is worth investigating again, worth having on record? David obviously thinks move on.
Yeah.
I think that when you have a Prime Minister who set quite draconian laws for us, and they were pretty awful, and I mean, I know people who still have mental health problems because of what happened during COVID, because that they had to stay in their houses, and then you have Boris Johnson just treating it as though it doesn't matter.
I broadly agree with you. The only thing I would say is that this is like, you know, a dog biting a man is not news, but a man biting a dog is. What we need is a story that says Boris Johnson kept the rules. And that is worthy of a headline.
Very good, David.
Scarlett, front page of the Mirror today, and they're talking about one of the things is the Madeleine McCann search in Portugal at this reservoir, and they feel they know why the reservoir's being searched. What are they saying?
Well, I mean, they found pictures. So there's this guy, Christian Bruckner, who is German. He's in a German jail. He's not only a paedophile, but he's a burglar as well. So he fits the profile, and he is the chief suspect. And they found pictures on his phone of the reservoir, and they think that Maddie McCann might be buried there. I feel very conflicted about Maddie McCann. On the one hand, I think it's what her parents have gone through is absolutely terrible. And for them, every day is waking up to thinking, you know, they've never, ever been able, as though you can ever put a child's missing, possibly murdered. But I also do get quite shocked. I know this is the Germans and it's the German money. At the millions of pounds. I mean, you talk about, you know, the police being overstretched, and yet Prime Minister after Prime Minister will say, we'll put another few million to finding Maddie McCann.
It's because everyone's so much invested in this particular
I know I'm not here to agree with you, but I do.
I mean, but on the other hand, I do understand. If I was Maddie McCann's parents, I would want. I think closure is the wrong word actually, but I would want to know what happened. But that doesn't mean that actually people like. I mean, and I'm thinking in particular of David Cameron, you know, who goes, oh yeah, you know, we'll open this up when there were no new leads. I mean, I really. I think it's terrible, and it would be wonderful if she was found alive. But actually, I hope they find a body, and then it's over.
Well, also just to convict someone, you know, the sense of justice for them, not only to be able to have closure, but also some justice. I think a lot of people are just emotionally invested in the story. She's a figurehead for missing children. She's more than just Madeleine McCann. I think every child that's gone missing is kind of represented by her. It's
every parent's worst nightmare, isn't it? The fact that they would go on holiday and their child would be stolen.
Terrible.
Absolutely ghastly.
And is it 16 years? I don't go on a single holiday without thinking about Madeleine McCann. You know, we all covered it so intensely, didn't we, at the time? And as you say, for over a decade now.
Now we go to this Wayne Couzens case. So this pervert drives through McDonald's, exposing himself. I mean, God, I was thinking about this, David, and I was thinking even, what is the thrill? What is the kick? Apparently he did it twice. Apparently,
and more often, I bet.
And more often. And you know, you sort of think, what is the point? And anyway, there was this female police officer who knew that there was video footage of this, and she denied that there was.
Well, you see, it's a truism, isn't it? You know, I took through Parliament the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. The whole idea of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act was to open up what happened in police stations and try and make the police accountable for all those cosy little conversations that go on in police canteens where things are done that shouldn't be done. It's a truism that the police look after each other. the consequence of police rallying round this awful Cousins man is that he was free to still be a police officer and kill an innocent woman. And what I find awful is that these people have not been brought to book. And I really just think it's sad that we cannot get a police force which can properly be relied upon to expose the rotten apples in the barrel, and we supposedly have, you know, a bunch of people who look into what they do, and they're no good either.
You know, and this what's her name? I don't know what her name.
What, this PC Naughty or whatever she is.
She
Samantha Lee.
But she now has a site on OnlyFans or whatever it is, where she strips off and
in her police uniform.
In her police uniform. I mean, no, she's not in the police.
Is she still a police officer?
No.
No.
She shouldn't be allowed to wear the uniform.
Well, it's not the uniform, but it's a sort of sexy policewoman outfit.
But
she's trading on
the fact that somebody like that has been a police officer and in an important position in relation to a man who turned out to be one of the most horrible murderers of our time. And the fact this woman, beneath all of that, is capable of doing this.
And the fact that she didn't see flashing, or more than flashing, as a crime as such, I think people who expose themselves and traumatise people like this, that is something I think has to be taken more seriously.
May I just say to you that I spent a lot of years of my life at the Home Office doing life sentence prisoner cases and whether they should be released or transferred to lower security prisons. And rarely does a sex maniac get up and kill somebody. They work up to it gradually, and indecent exposure is one of the recognised routes. I'm completely certain in my own mind, based on my experience, but it's common sense really, you don't need to have experience, that if he had been dealt with for indecent exposure, he would no longer have been a police officer, and this unfortunate woman, Sarah Everard, would still be alive. And the fact that there are police officers still serving who are culpable in that and have never been brought to book, the police should be ashamed. One of the worrying things that I have as somebody who grew up next to, you know, my father was a teacher, but he was also an inspector in the Special Constabulary. We lived next door to the police houses down in Wareham. I really admired those men and their kids. But now, if you said to me, do I trust the police? My honest answer is, I don't.
Yeah, no, I think you're completely right. And of course, how can you trust the police when you know that they cover up, and you know that this has been going on? It was ever thus, and the question is how's it ever going to change?
Well,
because
sadly, Scarlett, in this next story that we're talking about, this feeds into this.
Breakdown of trust.
The breakdown of trust. Can you believe what they're saying? We referred to the Cardiff riots of 2 nights ago, and a lot of the papers today are running the CCTV footage. The police said they had no vehicles on the ground in the area at that particular time. The CCTV footage would beg to differ.
I mean, this is unbelievable. Is that there were riots because 2 young men on an e-scooter were killed, right? Because after a crash, and the riots were because the young people in the area thought that the police were involved, and they were absolutely furious. And throughout that evening, throughout the night and the next morning, the police said, no, it really wasn't us. We came afterwards. And they lied. I mean, how you talk about trusting the police. The police lied, and it wasn't until people said, but we've got footage of it, that actually they said, yes, well, we were there.
Yeah, I mean, there's nuances, aren't there? They say that there was no police vehicle on the road of the crash, and, you know, it was 2 roads away that there's CCTV footage. So, you know, is that technically a lie? I'm not trying to defend the police. They should have come out and said, they shouldn't have taken them 24 hours to say there was a potential involvement in some way, because it's just precipitated, as you say, not only this breakdown in trust, but this backlash of anger directed, because 15 police officers, let's not forget, you know, who weren't involved in this, were injured by the mob.
And the worrying thing is the police don't get it. I mean, they think they can do silly little lies that might be technically right because it was the next door street. But, you know, you think to yourself, what are these people on? Don't they realise that at the moment there is a battle going on for public trust? And I believe that public trust has, in the police, sunk.
Here comes another police story, and this involves Prince Harry, close protection officers. Should he, David, be allowed, this is in the Mail, should he be allowed to pay for his own protection?
Well, of course he shouldn't. You know, rent a copper, you know.
So definitely not.
You're worried that your various buyers will want to come and scrag you, so you'll hire a couple of armed police to protect you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it? And I basically think that where, you know, Harry, who isn't the sharpest tool in the box, has obviously got into the idea that by suing the press, he can somehow defeat them. But he can't. And the worrying thing is, not only is this going to cost him $500,000, it is said, because he lost this action against the police, where he was insisting that he had the right to protection if he agreed to pay for it. But we are footing the bill for the authorities resisting Harry. So that's 200,000 or 300,000. And I just think that, I mean, look, there are a list of people that I never want to hear about again. And almost the top of this list, you're right up there, Eamonn, but Harry is really the one. I don't think you're anything like as bad as Harry, though you're working on it, I know.
Scarlett, let's talk about Rishi Sunak. He's trying to sort out migration, those figures due tomorrow. He's written a piece himself in the Telegraph today, talking about, actually, interestingly, he talks about how when it's too many and too quickly, it creates problems with integration.
Well, yes, but I mean, I wish we could really take it seriously. Clearly, his advisors wrote the piece after, whenever he was asked about migration, he wanted to talk about small boats, whereas actually what we're talking about is massive legal migration rather than asylum seekers. And what he doesn't say is what he would do about it. I mean, that actually, you know, obviously this year it's enormous because of the Ukrainians and the Chinese. But actually, at the same time, we've got people who want more migration because there are so many jobs that aren't being done, because actually we've got very low unemployment. I know that people sort of think everybody should go out and fruit pick. And the problem is that nothing is being done, and they sort of whine. And of course, he has learnt the lesson that David Cameron and then Theresa May said, we're going to not have hundreds of thousands, we're going to have tens of thousands, and now we're up to 500,000. So he's not doing figures. But of course we want proper integration, and we want it done properly. But they haven't got a plan. I mean, they're just sort of going, we will solve this, and you think, no.
Well, they're talking about going after the visas for, you know, immediate family of students, and they think that will cut around 150,000 off the number straight away. And as Scarlett says, you take away the 70,000 from Hong Kong, and I don't know what the total was from Ukraine, 120, something like that. You're already quite a way down.
Personally, I think we were right to do what we did with Hong Kong. I think we're right to do what we do, obviously, with people who are trying to get away from Ukraine. I don't think it's so easy to justify moving whole families over, because briefly and for a relatively short period, people are doing postgraduate courses here. But look, you know, at the end of the day, the government has got to deal with this issue one way or another. It's either got to say, Britain is a country where people come and go. It's a centre of, for a lot of people, it's the centre of the world. You know, people regard Britain as somewhere that they will spend a bit of time in their life, and we just have to live with that. Fine. Or we say, we're not going to have this, and we cannot have that level of increase in the population due to people who just choose to be here. What you can't do is say you're going to stop and fail to do so, because that makes government look incompetent. And, you know, I woke up this morning and I said, I finally concluded this government is incompetent. Maybe I thought it for years, but I just think you cannot go on pretending you're going to do stuff and failing to do it.
Well, but I mean, they don't just fail; they don't even take steps to do it.
Do you know, everybody, I went to get my hair cut yesterday. I was looking around for a barber's nearby, and I ended up calling in somewhere, and it was run by a Palestinian guy. And there was he had another barber who was Greek and another barber who was, I don't know where he was from, but the three of them, and we had a great laugh.
And then he had blind barbers, like the one who did your hair, right?
Stop it, at least he got his hair done.
Oh, yes. But I can't afford, on the money I get, I can't afford to have a haircut.
But what I'm trying to say is there's magnificent stories about people and how they integrate into life, and I would love to have said to them, what's your story? Why are you here? Why are you allowed in and someone else is not allowed in, or whatever? And I look at somewhere like Northern Ireland, which I personally think has benefited greatly from migration, and it's made people think that there is a bigger world out there. We all know when we travel around the world, it broadens the mind. It's a great thing. It's just so sad that we just don't seem to have the numbers. You know, we can't say yes to everybody. And can we? How free are we to move around the world? If we want to live in Australia, if we want to live in Canada, we want to live in.
Well, there's certain criteria that you have to meet, the same as here. You have to have certain skills that the country wants.
Yes, I think Australia wouldn't welcome any of us, actually, because we don't have the right skills, and certainly David and I are so over the age limit. But I mean, we did decide to come out of Europe, which means we can't travel and work in Europe. No. I mean, that's the terrible shame, is that we have deliberately cut ourselves off.
Well.
And again, like complicated matters more, I can live and work in Europe because
you're Irish.
Because I'm Northern Irish. We have dual citizenship of UK and Europe. As it turns out. So the whole situation is so complicated.
Well, as Rishi Sunak said, the Northern Irish get the best of every deal because they're both in the UK and in Europe.
Yeah. And I resent that, don't you?
I
don't want.
I'm only looking at him.
Well,
I'm resenting him.
Well, I resent that there are no politicians running the country in Northern Ireland.
I agree.
If night after night, and what is happening, we lose dentists, physiotherapists, police officers.
Yeah, you're right.
Just everything because these people will not run the country, and it is absolutely disgraceful. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say we're going to carry on with the theme of migration. We're going to say goodbye to David and Scarlett. More from them just after 7:30. But Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is warning that uncontrollable migration risks pushing public services to the brink.
OK, so this is after the government announced yesterday that all foreign students will be barred. We were just referring to that from bringing family members to Britain from January.
Well, our political reporter Olivia Utley spoke to some of the architects of British immigration laws to find out how we got into this situation.
Today we are introducing new legislation to keep my promise to you. To stop the boats.
Stop the boats!
Stop the boats.
It is no exaggeration to say that Rishi Sunak has staked his reputation on stopping migrants who cross the Channel illegally in small boats. But has he painted himself into a corner? Bringing down illegal migration numbers against a backdrop of intense global instability was always going to be tough. And whichever way the PM has turned over the last 6 months, he has encountered roadblocks, from rigid international human rights laws to indignant archbishops. To find out more about the scale of the challenge he faces, I spoke to some of the architects of British immigration policy over the last decade, including Theresa May's Chief of Staff, Nick Timothy.
I think what everyone's realised over the last few years is with the land border, you can simply put up a wall and keep people on the other side. With the sea border, once people are crossing and they land, there's very little you can do about it. And the problem is when people do reach the country, once they actually step foot on British soil, it's then very difficult to remove them, even if they are found not to have a legitimate asylum claim.
The Prime Minister and Home Secretary hope that their illegal migration bill, which faces its third reading in the House of Lords this week, will crack the problem once and for all.
This bill enables detention of illegal arrivals without bail or judicial review within the first 28 days of detention until they can be removed. And that is precisely what this bill will do. That is how we will stop the boats.
But if these assurances sound familiar, it's because they are.
This government is unapologetic in the way in which we now have the Nationalising Borders Bill, the new plan for immigration.
Is this immigration bill any different from anything that we've seen before?
It is different. I think the reason that we haven't seen the removals to Rwanda yet because of these challenges based on human rights laws.
Lord Frost, former Brexit secretary and close confidant of Boris Johnson, sounds optimistic too.
This bigger, much more comprehensive approach, the Rwanda approach that means people don't get to stay in the country, that really ought to make more difference. But let's see.
But there is a serious question mark over the practicality of the plan. Last year, the policy faced a bitter blow after the first planned flight was grounded on the runway following a late intervention by European judges. There are concerns too over the morality of the plan.
It is isolationist. It is morally unacceptable and politically impractical.
It is universally acknowledged in Westminster that the path to a Conservative victory in the next election is very narrow indeed. If Rishi Sunak fails to deliver his promise of stopping the small boats, it will disappear altogether. The pressure is on. Olivia Utley, GB News.
Stay with us, we'll have more for you in just a moment on the latest lockdown breach allegations against former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, which he claims are politically motivated. See you in just a moment.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Boris Johnson hits back after he's once again reported to police over more alleged lockdown breaches.
Hello there, very good morning to you. Good to see you. It is coming up to 7 o'clock on this Wednesday, the 24th of May.
This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
Boris Johnson threatens to sue the government after it referred him to police over allegations he once again broke lockdown rules. Investigators are looking into potential breaches at Downing Street and Chequers.
Serious questions for South Wales police in the wake of riots in Cardiff that followed a crash which killed 2 teenage boys. Despite officers saying none of their vehicles were present at the time, CCTV from the area appears to show police following the boys minutes before.
The Prime Minister has warned uncontrolled legal migration is leading to unmanageable pressure on public services. Writing in The Telegraph, Rishi Sunak says he's committed to bringing down immigration that is too high and too fast.
And we'll have the latest inflation rates as the ONS release the number this hour. And our economics and business editor Liam Halligan standing by. He will explain what they mean for you.
hate abbreviations like that. ONS, the Office of National Statistics. So basically, either say it or don't say it. Too many abbreviations. Don't like abbreviations. Get in touch via Twitter or email. I mean, they're very in. You know, they're like if you work in accountancy, you'll have an abbreviation. If you work in, you know, retail, you'll have a certain abbreviation. Our abbreviation will be gbviews@gbnews.com. Okay, or you can tweet at GBNews as well.
To our top story, Boris Johnson's once again been reported to police by civil servants over fresh allegations he breached lockdown guidelines.
Well, Thames Valley Police and Scotland Yard have confirmed they're both looking into potential breaches which took place at Chequers and Downing Street.
Johnson's said to be considering suing the government over the move, with his team calling the referral politically motivated.
Well, does it matter if it's politically motivated, if it's just true? Deputy Editor for Spiked, Fraser Myers, I put that question to you.
Well, that's a good point. I suppose most people will probably be tired of this scandal. It's been going on for several years now. This isn't even the first police investigation into Boris Johnson's lockdown breaking. People will remember he became the first Prime Minister in office ever to face a criminal penalty for his... I think it's a bit much to call them parties, but for his gatherings, let's call them, in Downing Street with the warm beer and Union Jack cake. Now, these relate to possibly more breaches in Downing Street, but also trips to Chequers, where he is said to have met his mother and the TV presenter Kate Garraway. Now, the defence that we're hearing again was similar to last time, is that these were work-related or were not pleasure-related. We don't know what rules might have been broken because we don't also know when they took place. There's a kind of vague date at some point between the summer of 2020 and 2021 where there are all kinds of rules in play as to who you could meet. Members of the public would have been extremely confused about it. I'm sure many officials didn't quite know what was going on a lot of the time. Rules were being made on the hoof constantly.
Yeah. I'm just looking at reaction, Fraser, coming in here. Paul says, everyone broke the rules. Well, not true, Paul, but maybe a lot of people did. You had to queue outside a supermarket with 2 metres distance. Yeah, remember that. Then once inside, you stood next to people at the shelves. Glenn says, move on, stop wasting government money and time on such stupid, trivial things. He's speaking for many on that one. And Keith says he broke the rules because he didn't believe what he asked us to do was right.
Well, I think, the much bigger issue and the much bigger question should be, should we have had those rules in place? Did they make sense at the time? What were the impacts of shutting down society off and on for 2 years? You know, we're still living with the consequences of that. You see that in the economy, you see that in the extraordinary NHS waiting lists, which are now at about 7 million patients. You see it in inflation. And you see it in some of the children missing from school, mental health problems, all kinds of things. Those are much, much bigger issues than whether, Boris Johnson or any other leading public figure may have illicitly met up with their mother or with Kate Garraway, essentially. So, I think a lot of the time we're seeing this a lot in politics now. We're seeing similar things with Suella Braverman, where we're arguing over, a speeding ticket or various other small scandals, where the bigger picture, the bigger issues are being missed for actually what are quite minor breaches.
We're not going to miss the inflation figures, which have just been released. Isabel, what are they?
So we're hearing they are down from double digits for the first time since August last year, down to 8.7% for April. They were 10.1 last month and 10.4 in February. The Treasury will be very pleased about that. Bank of England as well, facing a lot of flack yesterday when they were taking questions, talking about serious lessons needing to be learned in how they tackle inflation. Food, interestingly, stubbornly remaining around 19.1%. We're going to get proper analysis on all of this from Liam Halligan in just a moment, but I just wanted to break those figures.
19.1%.
It's replacing energy as the main cause, really, of this stubborn inflation.
And why would that be? Fraser, this will take a lot of pressure off Rishi Sunak, one would have thought.
I mean, to an extent, I think people need to be reminded, perhaps, that inflation doesn't mean prices are coming down.
It's not deflation,
it just means that prices are rising slightly less quickly than they were last month. And, you know, with food prices rocketing, as you've said, that is going to really hurt people. And cutting inflation, halving inflation, was Rishi Sunak's big pledge, his #1 pledge that he gave at the beginning of this year. And he's behind on that. You know, we were expecting inflation to come down much more quickly, a lot sooner. Now, the Bank of England has to take some blame for that, of course. They're in charge of setting interest rates. They were the ones who pumped, you know, several hundred billion into the economy, which was obviously going to be inflationary. They denied it at the time. They said that all the wonks said that inflation was going to be transitory. It wasn't a long-term problem. You know, they were very, very wrong, clearly.
Fraser, quick word on the events in Cardiff, which we're learning more every day as to what happened. Were the police there? Were they not there? The deaths of these 2 young teenagers as well. We're going to cross live to Cardiff in just a second, but another police scandal.
I know, it's, you know, the police are just in the mire constantly. There's the Wayne Couzens scandal, there's... essentially, the new Met police officer can't get a grip. You hear about racism, sexism, every ism under the sun.
Nicola Bulley, there was all the criticism around that as well.
Absolutely, revealing, you know, that she...
and they all feed through to each other, which I think leads to the atmosphere, part of the atmosphere that there was in Ely, in Cardiff. Let's go to Paul Hawkins. He'll tell us more. Paul.
Quieter night here in Ely than it was the night before. There was some tension yesterday and there were calls for calm, especially after that video emerged yesterday, that CCTV that has been verified of a police van chasing what looks like 2 youths on a bike. That is on Frank Road. It's about half a mile from where we are currently on Snowdon Road, which is where the incident happened and where, as you can see behind me, a huge wall of murals have assembled saying Harvey and Kyrie. So those are the 2 young men that were killed in that collision yesterday, which police are investigating. And because of that video that emerged just shortly after, the local police and crime commissioner and the police said that there was no chase involving police vehicles. They weren't present at the time. And then that CCTV involved, they've now referred themselves to the IOPC, that's the Independent Office for essentially the police investigator. So at the moment, there's a lot of questions about, were the police present? Were they involved in that chase? Did they contribute to the accident? And then, of course, there's also an ongoing investigation into the violence that erupted following that. There was a lot of rumours circulating on social media. Very difficult to find out what actually happened and what the truth was. And that led to the riots. 15 officers were injured. 11 of them were seriously injured. And we know a number of them were taken to hospital. There will be further arrests in addition to the arrest that happened yesterday. But this is an area where there's certainly a much lower level of trust in the police at the moment because of what happened yesterday and because there are so many questions and so few answers.
Yeah, OK, Paul. Well, listen, keep us posted on any developments in the story. Really confused picture, as you say, and lots of very serious questions for South Wales Police to answer there. Thank you.
OK, the latest on the inflation figures that have just been released. Liam Halligan, our economics editor, right across those, and the headline figures are what?
The headline figure, Eamonn, is that the Consumer Price Index in April was 8.7% higher than in April 2022. There's the number. That's down sharply from the March number, which was 10.1. Of course, inflation peaked back in October at 11.2. These are huge numbers when you think that the Bank of England's target is 2%. So we're still more than 4 times above the Bank of England's target. But look, while it's good news that inflation is down, that's going to help the Chancellor, the Prime Minister, when they negotiate with public sector unions about wages, they can say inflation's coming down. Look at these food price inflation numbers, still absolutely eye-watering. We had food price inflation in April of 19.1%. So food is a fifth higher than it was a year ago, and that's down only slightly from the March number, which was 19.2%.
But my friend, what is the justification with this? We know the Chancellor had the supermarkets in yesterday yesterday, and he was talking to them. That all seemed to have ended in tears.
Well, I'm not really sure it ended in tears. It ended in hugs. I didn't see any words reprimanding anybody. It was all very lovey-dovey and chummy-chummy, it seems to me. It almost seems as if getting the food retailing bosses into Downing Street, into the Treasury, was a bit of preemptive spin, knowing that these eye-watering food price inflation numbers were in the pipeline. Look, this, in my view, this is completely unjustified. The food bosses would say labour costs are up, energy costs are still high. That feeds into food processing costs. But wholesale food prices around the world have been falling, Eamonn and Isabel, falling for the last year.
OK, sorry to interrupt you. We've got to go because the Minister's standing by, but we will have lots more throughout the programme about those breaking news, those inflation figures this morning. Let's get reaction, shall we? First of all, from the Secretary of State for Justice, Alex Chalk KC. Good morning to you, Mr Chalk. Presumably you'll have heard what we were saying just then. Jeremy Hunt having the supermarkets in yesterday. Worrying to see food inflation still at 19.1%, isn't it?
Yeah, look, it is still high, but I think, this overall news today is really, really promising. And it comes, of course, after the Bank of England upgraded the growth forecast for the UK up a full 0.7%. So that's very, very significant. I think what it shows is that this country is at a crossroads. If we stay the course, if we hold our nerve and drive down inflation, then the prospects for this country are very good indeed. If we stick, grow the economy, halve inflation, cut debt, cut waiting lists and stop the boats, if we stick with those priorities, we can have a very bright future indeed. So it is promising.
Well, it's not too promising to me. I don't think it's too promising to people who are heading to the supermarket today or paying their restaurant or their takeaway bills or whatever goes on. Call me impatient, Alex, but when are we likely to see? I mean, the fact that we're talking the rate of inflation is down slightly doesn't mean to say that food prices are still not going up. They are going up by 8.7%. What good news can you tell? As Liam Halligan's saying, food prices around the world are going down. Why are we stuck on 19.1%?
Well, look, the government is absolutely clear that it will do everything it can to work with the supermarkets to bring them down, to ensure that as the energy prices come down, and they've gone from something over 700p a therm down to around 70, that does feed through into prices. But the point I wanted to make is that overall, the fact that overall inflation is coming down, this means that the prospects of our economy are improving. So as I say, growth is up. The IMF forecasts, which were depressed, which were artificially low, were showing that the British economy is more resilient than people had bargained for. And I think whether you're talking about food prices, whether you're talking about manufacturing, whether you're talking about the services sector, this is an economy which is starting to look really positive for the future. So that's why it's so important that we hold our nerve, don't get into some wage price spiral, so that we can really look forward to some growth which will feed into people's pay packets across the piece.
I just want to give you the reaction of the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, who frankly sees herself as the Chancellor in waiting to all of this. She says this will be why, the public will be asking why this Tory government still refuses to properly tackle this cost of living crisis, why they won't bring in proper windfall taxes on the enormous profits of oil and gas giants. They say the reality is that never have people paid so much in taxes and got so little in return.
So that, I think, it's complete misrepresentation of the situation. So the British government has put in something around £90 billion to supporting people over this winter. So what that means is around half of every household's energy bill has been paid to try to assist with the cost of living. And also on the issue of windfall tax, look, around the windfall tax already is around 75%. Our ability to do that work, to assist people with their incomes, is because we've taken these robust measures. When it comes to Labour, I'm sorry to say that whenever they talk about raising money, they then spend it about 15 times. So we have absolutely no certainty about any credibility. And indeed, that's not just me saying that, it's plenty of independent commentators as well. So look, we will do everything we can to support the British people. What we're not going to do is find ourselves into a situation where there's a wage price spiral, which is what Labour would do, which would make everyone poorer. Because lest we forget, inflation is the greatest destroyer of all. If you don't tame inflation, then everyone becomes poorer. We're going to stay the course.
Alex Chalk, of course, you are not the Chancellor, you're the Secretary of State for Justice, and I know you're on today to talk about our relationship with Albania. Albania, what is going on? What are we trying to do? Why is Albania so good at exporting criminals to us?
Well, Eamonn, that is what I wanted to have a chat about. So the situation is, in our prisons, we have around about 1,400 Albanian nationals. We are very clear that that is a cost to the British taxpayer. So not only is there the offence itself, but also the cost, around about £40,000 a year for each individual. So we've signed an agreement with the Albanians, which will mean that the most serious offenders, up to 200, but probably more in the future, of the most serious offenders, that's to say the ones who are serving the longest sentences, will now serve those in Albania. So that's good news for the British taxpayer, because it's much, much cheaper overall for that to take place.
Why not all of them?
So the position at the moment is, of those 1,400, quite a lot of them are on remand. That's to say they haven't been convicted. So obviously you can't do that. Something like 600, 700 or so. But it's important. This is not a cap. Let me be clear. This is not a cap. But it's absolutely right that we take this in stages. So we've got 200 of the most serious. And the reason why that's important is because if they are due to serve very long sentences, say for the sake of argument 2, 3, 4, 5 years, at £40,000 a year, you can immediately see how that adds up. So this is about ensuring those that cost the most of the British taxpayer go back. And as I say, this is not a cap. In future, if it goes well, and we have every expectation that it will, you expect to see more going back.
Those are the prisoners. What about those who are coming over in small boats? We know that last summer they accounted for around a third of those people making that crossing, coming from an economically prosperous and safe country. I know you've sent back, I think, in the region of 400, but last year it was something like 1,200. It needs to be more.
And that's why we are absolutely clear that we want to stop the boats, and we will do so robustly and we will do so fairly. And I know that working with the Prime Minister, who's completely focused on this, completely immersed in the detail, and I have regular meetings with him about doing so, because the area that I'm responsible for, operationalising this legislation in November, making sure there's enough tribunal capacity, we want to send a clear message that those who arrive illegally, there will be consequences for that. Because, by the way, it is no fairness to those who've played by the rules, done the right thing, come to the UK legally, if those who do so illegally are jumping the queue. You know, that's just not fair. It's not fair on the British taxpayer. It's not fair on those who've arrived legally, and it's not fair on any of your viewers. And that's why we'll be robust, but we'll be fair.
Well, thank you for that. Alex, as well as being an MP, you're also a King's Counsel. I just want to tap into your legal brain and talking about playing by the rules and playing fair. Boris Johnson. Where do we go? Where do we go now? If the fact is being referred now to 2 other police forces for lockdown or possible lockdown breaches, has the time come to kiss that goodbye and say that was in the past, or to kiss Boris Johnson goodbye?
Well, look, the position is that in the course of the inquiry, there's a document review. So that's to say lawyers have got to sift through a whole load of documentation and pass to the inquiry such documents as relevant. As I understand it, that when they looked at those documents, they then thought that there was material which they passed to civil servants. Civil servants, without any intervention from ministers, I want to stress that, took a decision to pass it to the police. Now, you talked about fairness. I haven't seen those documents quite properly. They wouldn't be passed to me. And so, really, it's very difficult to say anything further about it. That's now with the police, and they'll have to take a view about it. So there's really not much more that I can usefully or properly say.
No, except that Boris Johnson, of course, claims that it is politically motivated, that this is a stitch-up and that this is the civil servants acting politically. You don't accept that?
Well, look, it's not a question of not accepting it. It's simply I can't reach a view either way, because see, what will have happened is the material will have been passed to the civil service. Once they've seen it, they can't unsee it. So they've got to make a decision in accordance with the Civil Service Code whether to sit on it, whether to suppress it, and no doubt some would criticise them for that, or whether to pass it to police. But look, the decision about whether that was the right or the wrong thing will be determined by what was in it. You know, what the documents themselves said. And so, you know, to try to reach a view on the basis of partial information, I think is, you know, it's not helpful to your viewers, and it's not fair to the individuals concerned. So I think we just have to let that play its course.
OK, Secretary of State, thank you. We'll leave it there. Alex Chalk is the Secretary of State for Justice. The time, 19 minutes past 7.
Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. A woman has died after being hit by a motorcycle that was part of the Duchess of Edinburgh's police escort. 81-year-old great-grandmother Helen Holland was struck in London on the 10th of May, but died after sustaining irreversible damage to her brain.
Former American President Donald Trump will go on trial in March next year. Mr. Trump appeared via video link at a hearing in New York over charges he falsified business records to conceal money paid to silence the adult film star Stormy Daniels. He's pleaded not guilty to all charges, claiming he's a victim of election interference.
Drivers have been urged to report all road surface cracks following a surge in pothole-related breakdowns. The AA says it wants authorities to realise the true state of the roads, as they can't be held responsible for a pothole that they don't know about.
The roads, you talk about the true state of the roads, the RAC say, the roads are appalling.
Outside my house. Awful.
Yeah. It's like a war zone outside your house.
It's like a third world country.
Yeah. No, it's really bad. And I mean, again, we've either got to admit we can't afford to fill in your roads, we can't afford to give you decent roads, but stop lying about it. I mean, I was able to see, not that we have a government in Northern Ireland, but last week there, absolutely disgraceful. We used to have such amazing roads, such beautiful roads. We've got so much little traffic compared to other parts of the UK. But absolutely ghastly, and the RAC are absolutely right. I don't think, Isabel, the potholes can be fixed. I actually think we've now got to a stage where...
Just need to resurface.
We'll never be able to do it. Never, ever be able to.
We're all going to need 4x4s just to get around.
Just to negotiate.
And it really does irritate people. You know, I see it day after day because they fill it in and 2 weeks later there's rubble around the edges and lorries come along and you've got the hole again.
Yes. You should take pride in filling your holes in.
Absolutely.
I do. Do you not think so?
Absolutely. A la Rod... Was it Rod Stewart who was out there?
He was. He was out doing it because he had this low-level Ferrari which would just pump the diamond.
Not good for the suspension.
Diane, we're raising your suspension today. GB News Breakfast, best programme ever. I can't get on and do anything in case I miss a good laugh.
So many people say that. Chris in York.
We're trying to be deadly serious.
Eamonn, I'm crying. Please, never change. Don't encourage him. Gina in Warwick says, Eamonn, a ray of sunshine.
That's your weather forecast today. Stay with us as we ask if the pursuit of social media fame is causing an epidemic of bad behaviour. TikTokers they're all at it. They're all at it. What are they doing? We'll tell you next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Let you know what's ahead on the programme on this Wednesday morning.
At 8:10, we'll be down on the farm to find out from people who work there what they make of the Chancellor's efforts to bring down the cost of food.
Yeah, what are they going to do? 8:45. OK, so inflation, it's down a bit today. That's good, but prices are still up. We're going to be asking the Labour Party about their new economic plans to stabilise the country's economy. What do we do? What industries do we need? What are they going to do about it? And, get involved in the discussions, and they are gbviews at gbnews.com worldwide, or tweet at gbnews. Now, TikTok is a social media platform, and it first emerged into our consciousness during the pandemic, and now, Isabel?
It has millions of followers here in the UK, and not without controversy.
Well,
tell me why, Eamonn.
On Monday, this little 18-year-old, how can I describe, person...
Don't use that word.
Yes, was arrested on suspicion of breaking into homes uninvited. So then he records himself on TikTok, encouraging other youngsters to do the same. Look whose house I'm in, da-da-da-da, whatever. We've got a psychotherapist in the studio for Isabel, but she's now going to talk about this matter as well, not just for you. I mean, you need somebody to talk to. I often think that. Emiliana Silvestri, who believes the world would be a better place if all social media got cancelled.
Oh, absolutely. Meanwhile, the showbiz reporter Ellie Phillips thinks that platforms like TikTok can be good for engaging youngsters in politics, charity and health. Welcome, both of you.
Now, the first thing is, do we have any video of this break-in? Do we have any of this? We can't use it, apparently, in case we encourage it as well. But, Ellie, why on earth would you see that as a good idea or a good thing to do?
I don't think that obviously what that one individual did is a good thing to do, but I do think that it's not really the platform that's made that happen. A bad person is a bad person. I don't think social media makes you a bad person. If you're looking for kind of validation from other people, you might get that from a WhatsApp group, from your friends, you might get that from the school playground, you might get that from kicking out and about with whoever you're kicking out and about with. Social media is just another way of showing that. So I don't think that if you think about it, there's 1 billion users on TikTok. Not every single one of them is going out doing what this one individual did and encouraging to do that. So I think you're looking at a very, very small percentage of users who are using it in the wrong way. And it's like, for example, if you want to find Andrew Tate in your life, you'll find Andrew Tate in your life. You don't necessarily need social media to do that. Bad people exist in real life. You're just showing them online. And if someone is stupid enough to film themselves doing it like that, then that says more about them than the platform themselves.
Emiliana, do you agree with that? Or do you think that in some ways this kind of raises the bar all the time, increases the pressure to do something more, comedic in value? You see it with people sort of falling off cliffs trying to get the ultimate selfie for Instagram because they're trying always to get a better picture. I mean, we're all doing slightly strange things, aren't we, for social media?
Yeah, unfortunately looking for external validation that you'll never get because validation comes from something inside of you. But I think we're in a TikTok-sick society, and I think that what we're not discussing, and it's a much deeper level, is the addiction that this particular platform is causing in children. And at the moment, we currently have, I think, 120 million children, this was released from the World Health Organization, being treated for online gaming addiction, more than we have adults being treated for cocaine. And what I don't think anybody's discussing, which I really think we need to, is the part of the brain that creates dopamine, the part of our brain that gives us pleasure, joy, reward, usually created from achieving something. We are now getting very quickly hits of dopamine from going onto these TikTok videos, and that is creating addiction tendencies in very young people. As soon as they're adults, what are they going to want then? And unfortunately, parents want to give these phones because then they get some time, and the problem with that is that if you don't connect with your children and you leave them sitting like this, they are using the part of their brain that's creating addiction.
Ellie, are you on it?
I am on TikTok. I'm not the biggest TikTok user. It's one that I'm kind of like, I'm on technically. But to be honest, Eamonn, I mainly upload videos of me on here onto it rather than, filming myself doing makeup tutorials or trying on clothes and things like that. But I don't think you can take TikTok separately from other platforms, because I know it targets a younger generation. But
yeah, I agree. It's all of
very
them.
similar things.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
Yeah, exactly. And I totally understand what you mean about the fact that, there's this addiction. I actually spoke to Kate Winslet about this literally last week, which is so random because she has a film out which touches on this specific issue.
Do you know how many
think
clients?
It is the platforms people will find an outlet for it. I think they just need slightly better regulation.
But if those platforms didn't exist, they'd be getting those dopamine hits from things
playing in
like
the garden,
achievements,
hanging out with your family, all the beautiful things that we all did growing up. That unfortunately,
I get that, but social media is not going anywhere. So I think the problem.
Why isn't it? Why will it? Maybe it is if we all decided we don't want it anymore, and everybody got together for the future of the younger generations and decided that this isn't serving us as a society, and actually what we're doing is creating a really toxic culture. The owners of the people that created these websites don't allow their children to use these websites. So why the hell would I allow mine?
Interesting point. And also,
I totally get that, but that's you're coming from that from a parental side of view, which again is different.
I'm not. I'm coming from it from a societal point of view because I really care about younger
point
people.
Of view, Emiliana, the very fact, I think what's shocking us is to learn, and I'm sorry we can't show this footage because it's subject to a legal case, but this is encouraging youngsters to say, whose house can you break into, and then show us the evidence that you're there.
Yeah, but it's not even encouraging it. It's just showing such a dark part of society that young people don't need to see, whether they're influenced by it or not. I looked at TikTok briefly yesterday because of today, and I very quickly, next to the video I saw of the person that I was looking, saw 3 videos that actually kept me awake last night, really disturbing. One of a man being force-fed food, 2 others of very young people with not much on, and I don't need to see that, and it just popped up without me choosing to see it. And if my child was in the room, I would have been really concerned about what she'd seen. And unfortunately, I can't unsee it.
Why was he being force-fed food?
It was a very large person. I don't know. Yeah, it was supposed to be funny. It was a very large person being fed with a shovel. Yeah. And last night, 2 o'clock in the morning, they were my thoughts in my head. Like, it upset me.
Do you know? I started watching it over the weekend, and I got video after TikTok video of people squeezing pimples.
That's disgusting.
Right? And it is disgusting. Yeah. But I got addicted to the disgusting. Ellie knows what I'm talking about here. And the point is, after 20 minutes or so of looking at pus squirting all over the place, I then couldn't sleep because I thought, oh, this is awful. This is all. And I say to you, Isabel, stop sending me this. Stop doing this.
I'm not on TikTok. I'm a bit of a dinosaur when it comes to TikTok. Yeah. But we're wasting our lives scrolling, aren't we?
Emiliana says the same thing. It is sent to you. So it pops up on my Instagram.
Yeah, you don't get to choose, and you feel nothing. You feel nothing looking at this stuff, and children are not building empathy and all the really important parts of ourselves that we need to have a beautiful society. It's just going out the window.
Oh, it really stresses me out, Ellie.
Me too.
I think that I've just got to say, I think there are obviously negative parts of social media. You mentioned what you see on TikTok there. The things that I see on Twitter sometimes.
I agree. It's not just
porn on
that
there that I'm like, I don't want to see that. It's retweeted onto my timeline. But you choose to use social media as you choose to use it. You can set your own boundaries, whether it's, taking control of your children. Is it the time that they're allowed to spend on it? Again, I do think that social media platforms need better regulation, but ultimately at the core of it, if you're saying just social media makes you a bad person, I don't think social media makes you a bad person.
No, but I think it makes you a depressed, anxious person. I think it doesn't make you a bad person, but I promise you, and I do this for a living, it's making a lot of people very depressed and anxious. And in 20 years, we're going to have a society of addicted young people with a bad anxiety issues as a result of social media.
Also, Ellie, there's people who do bad things on it and feel good about it. Well, you could argue, is OnlyFans on TikTok? Is it?
I don't know. No, I don't think so. I think that's a different thing entirely.
So there's... no, is it a different thing? Do you do OnlyFans, Ellie?
Do you know how rude that is?
No, I don't think you can ask people that.
Basically asking her if she's a prostitute, actually.
No, that's not the case. That's not the case.
What I'm trying to say is...
prostitutes like that. They're not making money through...
No, there are people who...
objectifying themselves,
there were people who say they're empowered, Ellie. That's what I'm trying to say. That they will say by jiggling their...
That's a whole different debate.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's slightly different. But I must say as well, when you're saying that social media makes people anxious, I've also got to point out the other side that during lockdowns, when people couldn't have any physical social interaction,
and they were relying
on not being able to see their groups of friends and things like that, social media, whether it's Facebook for a certain generation or TikTok or Instagram, whatever it might be, did help a lot of people feel a lot less isolated during lockdown. So I think there was that.
That's a good point, but
I must note
unfortunately...
the trend as well, which is the anti-influencer trend, which is basically, tearing down this idea that everything in life is perfect and, that normal things are okay and a normal life is okay. So I think there are ways that social media is changing for the better, and hopefully with better regulation, with reduced time on it. There's ways that you could put on phones now, maximum amount of time.
I think that's unrealistic to expect the entire world to put restrictions on something that causes addiction.
Ellie's saying basically, if you're going to be bad, you're going to be bad anyway. Social media isn't the reason. But would you say that if there was more regulation, we would be all better off?
Who are you asking me?
In some ways...
Emiliano is too, I think.
I do think, unfortunately, it needs to be regulated because, like any system, look at the universal credit system. It's a brilliant thing in place that so many people abuse. It's the same thing. Social media is wonderful, I agree with Ellie, but unfortunately, because of the part of the brain that it's tapping into, it is causing addiction. That is why the people that created it, when they were very young, don't allow their children to use it.
Okay.
So I don't think we should allow ours to use it.
Guys, who knows? Maybe this whole discussion will end up on TikTok.
Apparently you're on it a lot.
Am I?
You and your Philip Schofield views.
Oh.
That's a whole other
also
subject.
another debate.
We'll have you back for that one, Emiliano.
Okay.
Yes, please.
We say goodbye to Ellie and Emiliano. Thank you both very much. And I'm sure it's got people at home thinking this morning. Let us know what you think. Do you think that TikTok and other social media has got us doing crazy things we wouldn't otherwise be doing?
Are you ever crazy?
Yes.
Do you?
I'm crazy about...
What's the craziest thing?
I'm not having this conversation. You'd be shocked, actually.
Would I?
Yeah.
Oh, you've gone up
I'm
my
so
estimation
wild.
on it. It's so wild.
I love that you think I'm actually a really big goody two-shoes. I think that's hilarious.
You're so boring. You are.
Yeah, well, it's good that I've convinced you of that.
You know you're really wild.
You've no idea.
Isn't that the song Wild Thing?
Oh, my goodness.
You make my heart sing, whatever. Anyway.
That was very good.
TikTok.
I went down a few
Okay.
notes
22
there.
minutes now before 8 o'clock on this Wednesday morning. Please do stay with us. Why?
Oh, because we're going through the papers and we'll be talking about the Lib Dem leader, Sir Ed Davey's recent muddle over what a woman is.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Let's bring you through the front pages as they look on this Wednesday morning. Mail, first of all, leading with Boris Johnson's threats to sue the government after they gave extracts of his official diaries to police without telling him. The result is he's been investigated over breaches of lockdown again.
The Times is focusing on a warning from the International Monetary Fund to the Chancellor. They say this is not the time to cut taxes, which is a bit rich, seeing as they got their forecast a little bit wrong about the UK economy. But we'll get into that, no doubt, in just a minute.
Salman Rushdie in the picture, having recovered from the attack that was made on him in New York, where he lost an eye, and receiving an honour from the royal family there. The Mirror continues to cover the search for Madeleine McCann. So police have discovered pictures of the search area on the suspect's laptop.
And The Sun says the disgraced star Rolf Harris was secretly cremated 2 weeks ago after dying from neck cancer.
So that leaves me with a dilemma, Scarlett and David, who are here to review the papers. No, it's not really a dilemma, actually. I have a Rolf Harris oil painting. So he was a landscape artist as well. And when he was convicted of these charges all those years ago, I immediately took it down. And someone recently asked me for it, and I was quite surprised that there would be a market. What would your view?
Were they unaware, maybe?
No.
I personally
would not put up a Rolf
No.
Harris picture in my home.
No.
Or indeed, even in my worst enemy's home. No.
No. Scarlett?
Yeah, it's just creepy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the painting, however good or bad. Presumably, you have great taste, but and every time you look at it, you think of what he did.
Well, my producer, she has a programme signed by every one of the Beatles, right? A concert programme, which is brilliant. But the front page is adorned by the face of Jimmy Savile.
Ooh.
So she's in that situation where she feels that she can't display that either because of these people.
And I think it's quite tough because it's so at the BBC the statue in front of the BBC of Ariel and
Eros or something, is it?
Yeah, Ariel and
yes.
something that was done by Eric Gill. I mean, who was a paedophile and actually raped his daughters.
Is that right?
And wrote about it.
Do we know that?
Well, it was in his
his
diaries. I mean, and there was a question about. I mean, what the BBC say is yes, he was awful, but we're keeping it, and it's now been attacked for the second time. And there is
Sounds like Dick Emery, doesn't it? Well, you are awful, but I like you.
But there is a real problem about what you do.
Yeah, historically.
I mean, it's like, you know, I love Eric Clapton's Layla, but I mean, Eric Clapton is not. I mean, you know, he's got weird views. He's a complete anti-vaxxer.
But
He's
I just
completely mad.
I don't see how. I think one has to be able to separate a piece of art from the character of the person.
I agree, actually.
Yeah, but you were just saying you'd never put up a painting by Rolf Harris.
Yeah, but that's different.
Well, what's the difference?
Because I wouldn't care to have a painting by Rolf Harris
So
in
just
my house. Anyway.
Because of, but you're not.
Anyway, even if he was a fetus living. No, but I think, you know, look, Picasso's attitude to women was somewhat behind contemporary thought. Do we not buy Picasso pictures? Well, I can't afford one anyway, but do we not have
continuing
Picasso
to paint
pictures?
once they've been found to be doing these weird and horrible things, and then I think it's morally dubious if there's still a market for it and them to be profiting when you know that they are of bad character. But if they're long dead or whatever.
Well,
Yes, but Picasso did those awful things. I mean, everybody knew. I mean, you know, and it was just accepted. He's an artist, so he can do whatever he wants.
Look, we woke up to the awful news today that this lady, 81 years of age, Helen Holland, David, hit by a police escort for the Duchess of Wessex, so she has now died.
Yes, the first thing I think to make clear is that there's no reason to think that the Wessexes or the Edinburghs, as they now are, knew anything about what their escorts were doing. But look, I try and keep my eyes open as I wander around London. You don't have to wander around London for very long before you see police cars with their lights flashing, driving in an outrageously reckless way. Why are they doing it? Why are they?
Well, to get to the scene of a crime.
Yeah, but
or for fun.
But you know.
But why does the Duchess of Edinburgh need a
Well, I'm with Isabel. What on earth is she doing with that sort of an escort?
Exactly. She doesn't need it, and I'm sure, you know, knowing her a bit, I'm not. This is not an attack on her. You know, at the end of the day, people are told what level of protection they will get. But what I think is outrageous is that you know, the police can get behind the wheel, and because they put their blue light on, they can drive as recklessly and dangerously as they want. That shouldn't happen.
This woman was hit with heck of a force.
Yeah, because he went about 40 yards.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
It's grotesque.
Poor thing, and she's been...
I mean, this is not a great day for being a police, if you're interested at all in your public image of the police. But, you know, it's been something that I've been concerned about for some time. And when I was in Parliament, I asked you a question about this, because it seems to me, I mean, I can't remember what the figures are now, because I haven't looked them up, but it was a couple of dozen people died every year from being hit by blue light police cars and vehicles of one kind or another. It shouldn't happen.
See, but I don't understand, you know, how it varies from different events. I mean, I opened as an ambassador or patron for the Woking and Sandbere Hospice. She came as the royal to open it, and she drove herself.
Yes,
She got out the car, put her glasses on the dashboard, and then came in, cut the ribbon, did a meet and greet, and then drove herself home. So I don't understand why she's got outriders on this particular occasion. And I do think there are questions, but I totally agree it's not her fault that,
Maybe
you know,
there was a
someone's
security
decided.
threat against her. But then let's not forget Princess Anne going up the mall in the 70s, and this guy breaks into her car and she tells him to naff off or whatever it was. But that was a scary situation.
But
Look, so many stories to talk about.
Yeah.
Let's go to supermarket prices, Scarlett, next. So they met with the Chancellor yesterday. We've got the inflation figures out today, slightly down, but food, what is it, Isabel, 19.1?
19.1.
Horrendous.
It is horrendous, and I think it is really important to remember that inflation might be coming down, but that just means the prices rise more slowly. They don't come down at all. But it just seems complete madness. So Jeremy Hunt has the supermarket bosses in and says this isn't good enough. And as always, there is no plan. And they go, yeah, but you don't understand. You know, it's really tough. We've got labour costs. We've got this. We've got that. I mean, there is no question that food is going up faster. There is no question that meanwhile farmers and people like that are not being paid particularly well. I mean, it would be different if they could say, well, our suppliers are putting the price up, but actually farmers are going out of business. And having people in to do what? To say, I've had them in.
Yeah. But I think they need to show their books, don't they? They're saying they're shouldering 80% of the costs at the moment. I don't believe it.
I don't believe it.
And people on this programme have come on and said it's a cartel between the supermarkets. They're all in cahoots.
Yes.
And they're making so much money out of it, whether it be not passing on the reduction in energy costs at the petrol pump with the supermarkets or whether it be on the shelves. And it's during a cost of living crisis and, frankly immoral. But I think that the Treasury have to do more, as you say, than just invite them in, have a cup of tea and wag their finger. Show us your books.
Right, show us your penis.
Oh.
Eamonn, you are incorrigible.
Well, I'm just saying, this is what Ed Davey is saying, and there's two misgendering or gendering stories that I want you to deal with, David. One in the Mail, one in the Telegraph. First of all, Ed Davey being reported as saying what?
Yes, that a woman can have a penis, and he thought this was axiomatic and wasn't really a matter of contention. People sometimes wonder why Ed Davey has taken so long to become leader of the Lib Dems and why it's only when they haven't got anybody else that they have to select him. And I think it's because he says completely crass things like that. I thought all kinds of weird and wonderful things were going to happen to our country. If someone had said to me a year or two back, you do realise that women can have penises, I'd have said, come on.
Hold on, David.
It's ridiculous.
There's something called transgender, right? When people, in this case, men feel uncomfortable in their body and they want to become women. And they start the process long before they have their penis removed.
But then they're not a woman yet.
But that's what... they are. If they live as a woman for... it's actually British law.
They're on the journey to becoming a woman.
If they live as a woman for 2 years, they are identified as women. So actually...
But that's the key, identified as women.
Yeah, so...
Why can't he say, you can have a penis and identify as a woman? That is more accurate, isn't it?
Well,
do you not think that there's a difference between a woman and someone who identifies as a woman and has a penis?
Well, I mean, I just think that there's a long journey, and what worries me about all of this is most of the people who are transgender, who are either on the journey or have finished the journey, actually just want to live their lives.
Well,
and instead
they should do that without all this publicity. I lived many years of my life, and I was completely unaware of all this stuff. And I think I was a happier person, and the society was happier before all this got into a matter of intense debate. I mean, do you remember when you were growing up thinking that there was all this debate about whether you thought you were a girl, but in fact you were a man? I mean, what is this?
But David, come on, in the 80s, when I was a radio reporter, we had in our newsroom, I mean, he happened to be a Tory councillor who was changing sex, and sometimes he'd come in a dress and use the women's loos, and sometimes he wouldn't, and he was becoming she. And actually, it was just fine. I mean, it was not a big deal, right? And I just think that actually, for people like him, that these whole culture wars, and actually one's making a fuss.
But it is a big deal if you're in prison in Scotland or whatever. We all know those stories. Guys, we've got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. They've put the the subjects out there. Do you want to talk about it? Let us know. Get in touch.
Yeah, and we're going to take a quick break. Before that, I just want to update you, breaking news line, in relation to the debate we just had on TikTok. An 18-year-old man has just been charged in relation to those prank videos which showed him breaking into people's homes, and he will appear in court today.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So today we'll see plenty of sunny spells around, but also a bit of cloud sinking southwards as well. And that's due to this weather front that's just coming into the far northwest through today. But generally that settled weather will remain around as high pressure stays centred to the west of the UK. So through this morning, it was a bit of a chilly start in some rural areas, but plenty of clear spells will mean it's going to be another bright day across much of England and Wales, though it could just be a little chilly around the coast sometimes with an onshore breeze. Looking across Scotland and Northern Ireland, there's a bit more in the way of cloud here today, with some spits and spots of rain at times sinking southeastwards through the day. So temperatures not faring quite so well here as they are further south. 22, 23 degrees Celsius as a high here for today. As we go through this afternoon, that cloud will start to sink its way further southwards, so bringing some overnight clouds to eastern and central parts of England and Wales. So it won't be quite a cold start here on Thursday as it was this morning, but across Northern Ireland and Scotland, with clearer skies through tonight and into Thursday morning, a cooler start here, though there will be a bit of a breeze, particularly around the far northern coasts. So to start Thursday morning, anywhere that has seen clear spells overnight will be bright to start. Further east, a little bit more in the way of cloud than what we'll have seen through this morning. But this will start to break up as we go through towards lunchtime on Thursday. And we could just see the odd shower popping up in a few places where we get some thicker cloud too. But a brighter day across Scotland and Northern Ireland than what we've seen of late, with plenty of sunny spells and temperatures just starting to rise here. The fine and settled weather isn't going anywhere anytime soon, though, as we go through the rest of the week and into the start of the weekend, with temperatures continuing to climb, especially across the south, where we could reach the low to mid-20s.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
The Chancellor warns food prices are still rising too fast, despite inflation falling to 8.7%.
A very good morning to you. Welcome to the programme and thank you for your company. It is Wednesday the 24th of May. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
And leading the news for you on this Wednesday morning, food inflation remains high at 19.1%, according to the latest data released in the past hour. The overall figure falling to 8.7%. The Justice Secretary told us he was proud of the government's progress on this.
Overall news today is really, really promising. And it comes, of course, after the Bank of England upgraded the growth forecast for the UK up a full 0.7%. So that's very, very significant.
Boris Johnson's threatened to sue the government after they referred him to police over allegations he broke new lockdown rules. Investigators are looking into potential breaches at Downing Street and Chequers.
Why did it take police in South Wales 24 hours to admit potential involvement in a fatal crash in Cardiff? The deaths of 2 teenagers sparked riots in the city on Monday night. CCTV showing police following the victims minutes before the incident.
And the Prime Minister has warned uncontrolled legal migrations leading to unmanageable pressure on public services. Writing in The Telegraph, Rishi Sunak says he's committed to bringing down immigration that's too high and too fast.
Thanks very much indeed. GB Views at gbnews.com or get in touch with Twitter at GB News.
So it is our top story this hour. The Chancellor warning that food prices are still rising too fast as the latest data shows food inflation at 19.3%.
The Office of National Statistics also showed that the UK's overall inflation rate has fallen to 8.7%. That is the lowest level in over a year.
Well, the Secretary of State for Justice told us just a short while ago that the government still has more work to do.
The government is absolutely clear that it will do everything it can to work with the supermarkets to bring them down, to ensure that as the energy prices come down, and they've gone from something over 700p a therm down to around 70, that does feed through into prices. But the point I wanted to make is that overall, the fact that overall inflation is coming down, this means that the prospects of our economy are improving. So as I say, growth is up. The IMF forecasts, which were depressed, which were artificially low, were showing that the British economy is more resilient than people had bargained for.
Well, let's get the reaction now of our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan. Good morning again to you, Liam. Let's start with the good news. We're out of double digits. That's a big sigh of relief. But people at home will be thinking, I don't feel better off, and I certainly don't feel better off in the supermarket.
The headline's good, Isabel, but once you dig below the surface, this isn't a great set of figures, I'm sorry to have to say. We are out of double-digit inflation for the first time since August last year, so that is good. It does seem that the government is inching towards its target of halving inflation from 10% to 5% by the end of this year. But when you look at the fine print, particularly food price inflation, there are lots of concerns. Let's have a little look at a graphic here, just to put the headline numbers. So CPI inflation, that's Consumer Price Index, last month, 8.7%. That's sharply down, as we've been saying, from the month before in March, when it was 10.1%. But look at food price inflation. Food price inflation is still 19.1%. That means in April 2023, a basket of food was 19.1% more expensive than in April 2022, up by a fifth. And that food price inflation number has barely come down since last month.
Let me ask you this.
When it was 19.2, Eamonn.
You look at that CPI figure, the top figure there, 8.7%, and then we look at the food price inflation, which may be dictated by world events. But is the first one lower because of Bank of England policy of raising interest rates?
Well, this is going to be the great debate now. We've got this food price number, we've still got these supply chain issues, and yet the Bank of England has done 12 interest rate rises in a row over the last 18 months or so. Interest rates were just 0.1% in December 2021. They're now, of course, 4.5%. The next decision on interest rates is June the 22nd. The money markets have just shifted since I last spoke to you. It's now nailed on 100% probability. It could change, but it's 100% probability. We're going to see another interest rate rise on June the 22nd to 4.75%.
So you come in and you say, right, OK, the CPI figure is slightly down here, and people say, phew. But they're being hammered. We're still 8.7% up in what we were paying this time last year. Interest rates are happening. People are just battered in every direction.
And the hammering is uneven. If you've got a big stash of savings, you like higher interest rates, of course. If you are in a poor or vulnerable household, you spend a much, much higher share of your income on food, Eamonn, don't you? On housing services, where inflation is still 12 or 13%, rents and so on. And this is why inflation is so insidious, because it does hit the poor hardest. But I'm beginning to think now that there is a real soul-searching going on within the policy-making establishment. Is the best way to attack this issue really to keep raising interest rates? When interest rate rises take a long time to work through the system, and we've already had 12 of them.
Yeah, and we saw a little bit of that sort of self-reflection, didn't we, yesterday from the Governor of the Bank of England. He was taking questions in a select committee hearing.
We have big lessons to learn.
Yeah, difficult lessons.
The first real apologia, if you like, that we've had for him. We also saw what we must now view, I'm afraid, as a bit of preemptive spin. The big food retailers going into the Treasury, having a chat with Jeremy Hunt. But I've read the Treasury readout, the operations note of that meeting, the kind of minutes that the Treasury sent to journalists like me. And it seemed more like sort of, you know, a nice catch-up over coffee. There didn't seem to be any hard edge to what the government was saying. Look, international food prices aren't just going up less slowly, they're falling. There's something called the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization. It's an index generated by the UN. It's down almost 20% over the last year. Wholesale food prices
you want
around
to know
the world
why it's
are
not down here?
I don't know why food price inflation is so high in this country, and that's adding to the fact that we now have the highest inflation in the G7. In the US, inflation's 4.9%.
Well, Liam, on that very subject, I'd like now to go to our reporter Dougie Beattie, because we're talking about the effect that this inflation is having on people, Dougie, who are actually producing our food. Now, you're live by satellite from Drumray this morning on a farm there. Tell us more.
Well, good morning and welcome to Drumray. Yes, I've had 3 farmers that have went on this journey with me in the last 16 months. When we started reporting about that food prices were going to rise because of input costs into the farm, they're the Crawfords, the Gibsons, and of course Sammy Hanna. Sammy is a dairy farmer here in Drumray, a very effective one, and of course the price of milk has went down on the farm gate in the last few months. And Sammy, how is that affecting you here?
Well, obviously inputs have went up 16, 17 months ago and have kept rising. Yes, they're on the downturn, but we're working now for, in a year's time, the costs are there. Putting in silage, fertiliser, electricity, all our inputs are all well up on what they were.
And of course, dairy is not just milk, so how is that cost not getting passed back to you? Explain a little bit about dairy.
Well, realistically, the milk you see and the price you're giving for milk in the shop is still sitting at the highest it has ever been. December past, we were sitting at 50p a milk per litre of milk. Now it's down to 30p. Remembering that milk is the cheaper part of the whole milk that we sell. You have yogurts, you have cheeses, you have creams, all taken out of the milk beforehand, the more profitable stuff that's within the milk.
And how does things like interest rates really hit the farms?
Well, on your borrowings or lending or anything that's you're getting money or bringing money in to produce, we're at the minute extending the farm or trying to improve facilities, putting a new milking parlour in, and just everything, costs and everything is all going up.
Well, there you go. Costs going up, borrowings going up, input costs. Of course, farms work a year in advance. So what we see in the fields here today will be next year's feed. So if prices are high, if policy's not there, and that's the main thing, no policy for food production, it will hurt us in a year's time and continue to hurt us.
Okay, Doogie, thanks very much indeed.
Yeah, Doogie was very on all of this. He said...
I know where this is going. I've just seen on your phone.
Doogie has a cow that he has named Isabel. And it's beautiful.
Upon your advice.
Well, I'm just saying, it's just on my phone here.
I get sent these pictures, Doogie, presumably from you. There's a chain here.
Isabel. And it's lovely.
What a cow I am.
Well, I'm just saying.
What a cow.
Nice, big, soft, cuddly cow. Nice, lovely.
I thought it was my spectacular udders the other day.
Best udders I've seen in ages. Anyway, thank you very much indeed. 8:10 is the time. Boris Johnson's once again been reported to police by civil servants over fresh allegations he breached lockdown guidelines.
2 police forces involved in this, Thames Valley Police and Scotland Yard, both have confirmed that they are looking into potential breaches at Chequers and at Downing Street.
He's saying he is considering suing the government over this because his people say the referral is politically motivated. Let's get the thoughts of our political editor, Darren McCaffrey.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that specifically because we spoke to the Justice Secretary this morning and he made the point, what were these civil servants supposed to do when the lawyers that were helping Boris Johnson prepare for the COVID inquiry handed over these details? It would be a breach of the ministerial code if they didn't refer them, wouldn't it?
Yeah, indeed, and that is the argument the government are very vociferously making this morning, that effectively they weren't really involved in this. This was the decision made by civil servants, but it is fair to say that Boris Johnson is pretty angry about all of this. He's issued a pretty terse statement today talking about how the events in question were all within the rules. This in relation to visits to either Chequers or Downing Street in 2020 or 2021, when clearly there were potential restrictions in place. He denies anything unlawful happened. He said that many of the events were held outdoors, says it's totally untrue. However, he goes on to say that these unfounded suggestions, both to the police and the Privilege Committee, may be concluded to be the hallmarks of yet another politically motivated stitch-up. And there is a sense, I think, amongst his supporters and others within the Conservative Party that there is and are civil servants out there to get Boris Johnson, Suella Braverman, they've got Dominic Raab, kind of the right-wingers within the Conservative Party, and that they seem to be picking them off one by one. Now, Prime Minister's going to face some questions, I'm sure, about this later on today. Of course, PMQs is taking place at 12 noon. Some might even suggest, though, Isabel, that actually this is quite a good distraction for the government, given the questions over the future of Suella Braverman and whether she should be investigated by the Prime Minister's ethics advisor. We're all this morning talking about Boris Johnson and not her, but it is fair to say that there is some anger in the Conservative Party about all of this. As for Boris Johnson, clearly this is not great news for him, and I think a reminder that any path that he thinks he's got back into frontline politics looks very, very narrow indeed.
Well, lots of his supporters have been coming out, not least our own presenter and Conservative backbencher, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Last night he talked about visiting Chequers at, well, I'm not sure what period in time he's talking about, but apparently they all kept to the rules. Let's have a listen in, Darren.
I can tell you that during that period, I went to Chequers. I was invited there with my children, entirely in accordance with the rules. Another senior government minister was going to come, but the Prime Minister cancelled him because you were only allowed to have one family present at the time. So what would have been a meeting with the Prime Minister, the Chief Whip and the Leader of the House of Commons just had me there because you couldn't mix families. The Prime Minister was diligent about it. I'd also say that one of my children after lunch bowled out the Prime Minister and removed his middle stump, but that would be boasting.
But we're trying to work out now why his family, why that would be regarded as legit.
Well, I guess it depends exactly when it was, because as we all know, the rules changed almost all the time. Darren, what do you make of that?
Yeah, it is quite difficult to work this out because we don't know specifically when these potential meetings or visits happen. We know Rachel Johnson, for example, his sister definitely went to Chequers, though she argues it was also within the rules. Clearly the rules were changing quite a lot, though if anyone should know what the rules were at the time, you would have thought it would be the Prime Minister. Has the Prime Minister been diligent in the past? I slightly have take on that assessment by Jacob Rees-Mogg. We know he's certainly been fined in the past, and we know what happened with Partygate. But in the end, this is complicated because he is the Prime Minister. Lots of what he would have done is work, particularly if he's meeting MPs and others. And this is going to be a question, frankly, it's going to be a question for the police, Thames Valley Police and the Met looking into all of this. But as I say, it politically makes things really tricky for Boris Johnson. He's not in the country at the moment, but he's still got this Privileges Committee investigation. He's now being investigated by 2 separate police forces. Politically, whatever one thinks of it, it's not a good look. And maybe it's why it feeds into that assessment by voters in a poll yesterday, where 60% of them suggested that he shouldn't even be an MP, let alone be Prime Minister again.
Thanks, Darren. Thanks for the update. Let's go to Cardiff now. South Wales Police are facing serious questions in the wake of the riots there on Monday night that followed a crash that killed 2 teenagers.
Yes, officers originally said none of their vehicles were on the road at the time, but CCTV has emerged, which appears to show a police van following 2 people on bikes minutes before the incident. Let's speak to Paul Hawkins. He's at the scene. Paul, I suppose the question will be why it took the police 24 hours before they admitted they could be potentially involved in this incident in some way.
Yeah, look, South Wales Police yesterday and the South Wales Police and Crime Commissioner initially saying that there was no police chase involved, that there were no police vehicles involved in that collision which killed 2 young boys, took 2 young lives. Then that video emerges and then we get a statement from South Wales Police yesterday saying they are studying CCTV and tracking data from the police vehicle, and adding that there was no police vehicles on Snowdon Road, which is where we are now. Clearly there is a video showing that there is a police vehicle. It is following a bike. We don't know whether that was the bike, and clearly there are some 2 young people on the bike. We don't know if that is the 2 young people that were involved in this crash, but there are questions for the police response. That's why they've referred themselves to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. That would be routine anyway. The IOPC are sending investigators to the scene to decide whether an investigation needs to follow. So questions for the police and a community that wants answers, really, that wants to find out the truth. In the meantime, a lot of focus has been on the 2 young boys. You can see this huge mural that's sprung up in the background, Harvey and Kyrie, referring to the 2 young boys who were killed in that traffic collision yesterday, 16-year-old Kyrie Sullivan and 15-year-old Harvey Evans. And we've seen people coming to lay tributes here this morning. It has been a quiet night in Ely compared to the previous night, but you can still see the scars down the road from that night's violence. There are still vehicles that are damaged, that are torched. There's a lot of rubbish in the road. There's kind of ash on the floor, and that level of violence also had an impact on the local people who live here. There was one of the cars that was damaged belongs to a woman with a disability who needs it to get to work, to get around. So, you know, the level of violence had an impact. The police response has had an impact. Lots of questions and very few answers.
Paul, thanks very much indeed. Look at all those flowers. A lot of people grieving there. Really, really sad story.
A lot of sorrow
and anger.
And a lot of questions to be answered. 18 minutes past 8.
Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
An 18-year-old man will appear in court after recording prank videos entering people's homes in London without permission. Bakari Bronze O'Gara was charged last night after failing to comply with a community protection notice.
A woman's died after being hit by a motorcycle that was part of the Duchess of Edinburgh's police escort. 81-year-old great-grandmother Helen Holland was struck in London on the 10th of May, but died after sustaining irreversible damage to her brain.
Former American President Donald Trump will go on trial in March next year. He appeared via video link at a hearing in New York over charges relating to hush money payments paid to adult film star Stormy Daniels. He pleaded not guilty to all criminal charges, claiming he is a victim of election interference. We're going to kick the ball with sport next. Can Brighton bring Man City's winning streak to an end? Paul Coyte with the latest on that next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 8:23. Thanks for your company this morning. Still to come on the programme.
Don't mention it.
No, thank
It's
you.
lovely to be
no,
here.
thank you.
Looking like 2 bananas. Yeah. Why didn't you phone me and say you were going to wear yellow?
Because I just knew you would know, like you did on Monday.
It was just
Really
telepathic.
freaky. Turned up in makeup this morning. I went, because I was wearing one of those, gowns.
Yes.
And I said, Eamonn, you've done it again.
Yeah.
How do we do it? Spooky.
Are you, incidentally, just if you're going to get in touch with us, are you in favour of matching or not matching?
I love it personally, but we don't plan it. What do you guys think? What do you think?
My wife's very anti-matching.
Oh.
But then she's, anything that's soft and cuddly and nice she wouldn't like. So we're yellow bananas together today. Good. So we're going to be talking to a Labour Party representative about their plans to rebuild British industry. What do you put in? What would British industry be? OK, as they unveil what they call their new business model for Britain. What's going to give us jobs? What's going to place us back in a manufacturing sector, maybe, or is that gone?
Yeah, that is at 8:45. And then the First 8 star, Fred Syria, is launching a third restaurant that's actually staffed by prisoners. At 9:15, we'll speak to 2 former senior prison officers about their efforts to try and get offenders back into work. Really laudable idea, this.
Really laudable, but maybe controversial as well. What do you think? Let us know. You can join in any of our discussions, gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GBNews. Let's take a look through the back pages. Hurry up and let us know our fate. This is Pep Guardiola. This is in the Eye. And he says he wants the Premier League to resolve the charges against the club, against his club immediately. I think the one problem is there are quite a lot of those charges. There are 115 of them. What does it mean getting back into the Champions League? Well, the Daily Star says Newcastle, it'll be a £100 million boost for them. However, having said that, they get about a fifth of what a team like Man City would get. I don't like that idea that the more often you're in the Champions League that you get more money for it. But anyway, they're very glad for what they are getting. And Operation FA Cup final in the Mail. Huge security operation planned for the first all-Manchester event to prevent a repeat of 12 years ago, in the FA Cup semi-final between United and City. A day I remember very well because United lost, but the day we adopted our dog.
That's why you remember.
That's why I remember
because I don't remember losses. I wiped them from my memory.
No.
When we lost to you in the League Cup final, I have no memory of that game whatsoever.
Well, that's the way to keep it.
But at least you got a dog, which is a nice way of looking back at it.
The dog was from the Dogs Trust, which was at Harefield, which is just up the road from Wembley.
Right.
And I left my wife and son to do the adoption things that were going on, fill in the forms, and I went to the match. And when I finished, I phoned her and said, are you home or whatever? And she said, no, we're still here.
Right.
They were still up there at 5 o'clock at night.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they couldn't leave the dog alone. They just loved it so much.
So on the way back from Wembley, you picked the dog up and then went home after that?
Well, yeah.
See, that's a nice day. That's a nice... Maybe everybody should do something like that.
Consoled me after being walloped by City that particular
If I had that situation, I'd probably have, like, a whole house of dogs, if it was for me.
No.
Do you know what I mean?
No,
It
I
would
know
be.
what you mean. But listen, the serious matter is there's going to be big problems FA Cup final day because trains are on strike for a start. And everybody's coming down from Manchester and they're worried about confrontations in, what do they call them?
Service stations.
That's the very word I was looking for,
Yeah, yeah.
service stations.
Service stations.
And the like, yeah?
So what they're having to do is, I mean, we're looking at probably 160 or so coaches, so obviously there's going to be hundreds of coaches of Man City fans coming down from Manchester, hundreds of coaches from outside of London for Manchester United fans coming into Wembley.
They're all coming in from Surrey.
So they're all going to come in there, but if they meet somewhere around Wembley. But seriously, they're all going to be heading down. Of course, I mean, no trains on FA Cup final day.
Yeah.
So the FA Cup final kickoff has been changed. Can you believe this? 3 o'clock kickoff. 3 o'clock kickoff for an FA Cup final. Who would have thought of anything so ridiculous?
That's fantastic.
So at least there's that. But it's just making sure that everybody gets down, everybody gets there safely. The roads are going to be gridlocked. There's prices, I think, about 60 quid for the ticket down on the coaches. But obviously, when you've got rival coaches and rival fans, you don't want them to mix. So it's being organised that, OK, we'll go to that service station, you go to that one, and we'll try and time it nicely so then everybody meets at Wembley.
I mean, you're right, we did laugh there about the Man United fans from Surrey, but there will be huge... I mean, Ireland will empty, Scotland will empty, Wales will empty. I mean, being a truly international club,
You don't have that many anymore, Eamonn. Come on, really? Still? Yeah, you do.
People think Ireland is orange or green. Ireland is red.
Right, okay.
Man United red, basically. OK, last night, or is this tonight?
Tonight, Brighton, Man City.
Yeah, right.
Brighton, Man City.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a love-in between Roberto De Zerbi, of course, the manager of Brighton, and Pep Guardiola. Pep has said some lovely things about De Zerbi.
He's done a great job.
I mean, he really has, and he's called him. I mean, Pep's called him the most influential manager in the last 20 years.
Gosh.
That's for what he's done, the style of football he's brought to Brighton, and how successful they've been. Of course, let's not forget Graham Potter was there for most of the season.
I wonder what Graham Potter makes. I wonder, does Graham Potter think, well, that was my team, I did that? I wonder, does he regret going to Chelsea? Or
I think well, financially, probably not, because he's got a huge payoff. But
getting the chance to manage a club like that doesn't come up too often.
Well, that's the thing. We discussed it, didn't we? And what do you do if you're in a situation, if you're at Brighton, and then a club as the size of Chelsea comes in? You don't know whether it's going to work, but you have to go for it, and it just hasn't worked for him. De Zerbi seems a different sort of character, though, to Potter. He seems a lot harder, and I mean, he's done an amazing job. They're going to have a guard of honour. Now, I don't know how you feel about that. So, for Manchester City winning the title, although they're playing Brighton, and Brighton essentially need 1 point to make sure that they're in the Europa League, which is what they've never done before in their history, there's going to be the guard of honour as the Manchester City players run through. Do you think that's a good thing? If you were an opposing side, would you be happy to do that, to show them
I think
the
you've
respect?
got to show a bit of respect.
You think so?
I think you got to.
I think so. So they give them the round of applause. I mean, they've still got games to go. So they'll come through on the pitch. And then you've got Alexis McAllister and Caicedo as well, who look likely to leave Brighton. And this is another thing De Zerbi has said, that they go with his blessing. He'd rather keep them.
Yes.
But that's the way Brighton are. They're such a good side. They sell
they're a feeder club,
they sell
so
players,
many,
and then they bring more in, and then they bring more in.
Yeah.
The other thing that I want to mention is that at the end of, and I'm sure this will be with United, and every club will do this, at the end of their last home game, and it's the last home game for Brighton, they do what they call the lap of appreciation. It's not a lap of honour sometimes, because clubs that have had a bad season.
Yeah.
Lap of appreciation. So you would have seen it 100 times. Yeah. So the team will come out, walk around and wave to the fans. Now, over the last few years, I've seen a change in this, which I really don't like, because they then, do you remember they would bring their children in, and then you'd get the shirts with daddy. Now it's moved on where you have friends and family will come out. So often you could have friends, you could have family, you could have like 10 people that are with a player.
Cousins there, can you?
Everybody's out there, so it's almost like come out on the pitch. This is where I work, and it's the fans that are the ones that should be appreciated and applauded for what they've done this season. Whereas a lot of the players will come out and they'll just walk around, they kick a ball around with the kids, and don't actually use it for what they should
engage with
and
the
I think
fans.
it's really important. So hopefully Brighton will do that and actually thank the fans for what they've done, instead of just seeing it as a free-for-all. Let's just bring our mates on it.
Just a quick word about what you get paid for being in the Champions League.
Yeah.
You know, we were talking there about a lot of money for Newcastle, but it's still nothing related to clubs who are there on a more regular basis.
Yeah, that is right. But the story, I think, of Newcastle is the money that they're going to make available for players. Now, it's £100 million is being said. Now, you would think £100 million, a huge amount of money.
Get you one player.
Get you one player.
Get you Harry Kane.
That's it. Harry Kane will be £100 million. Not that he's going to be going to Newcastle, have you know. But it's the same. It's any player, any great player or very good player is going to be £100 million. So the sound of it sounds like a lot of money to spend on players. But, of course, Newcastle, let's be honest, they're not short of a few bob. So money that comes in is not really going to make a huge amount of difference to what the owners have.
There's nothing like, and you'll know this, being a Spurs fan in the past, that walking out to that Champions League anthem is very good, isn't it?
I'm going to miss it next year.
Yeah, well, there you go. Don't you worry.
Maybe next year.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
OK, my friend. Thank you.
Stay with us as the former PM Boris Johnson's mocking President Macron over Ukraine.
Say to you, hand on heart. First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
"23 minutes before 9. Nice to have you on board. Here are the front pages of the papers.
At the Mail, leading with our top story, Boris Johnson's threats to sue the government after they gave extracts of his official diaries to the police without telling him.
Times focuses on a warning from the International Monetary Fund to the Chancellor. They say this is not the time to cut taxes.
The Mirror continues to cover the search for Madeleine McCann as police discover pictures of the search area on the suspect's laptop.
And The Sun says disgraced star Rolf Harris was secretly cremated 2 weeks ago after dying of cancer.
We're going through the papers one last time this morning in the company of David Mellor and Scarlett Maguire. And Scarlett, you want to start with a story about King Charles and his charity, and this is in The Guardian this morning.
Yeah, this is actually quite shocking, is that the Prince's Trust took over something called the Fairbridge Residence, and Fairbridge was a charity that in the last century sent young people, particularly young boys from poor families, out to Australia and Canada where they were abused in every way possible. And it's completely agreed. There's no question about how dreadful it was. And when an independent judge looked at it, they said that actually each person should be given £200,000. And the Prince's Trust says, well, we don't have enough money, so we're just going to give you 2,000. And because they've taken so long, I mean, about a quarter of these people have died. I mean, these people are in their 80s and 90s, and you just think, Prince Charles, how
King
rich?
Charles,
King
now.
Charles.
On the Sunday Times rich list, he was quoted as having 600 million.
Well, and I mean, didn't have to pay inheritance tax from all the stuff he got from his mum. And you just think these are people who've had awful lives, that actually what's happened to them, I mean, a lot of them have been affected for the rest of their lives. I mean, I remember, stories through the years about them saying, I was told my mother was dead and actually they were taken away. And it was, I mean, what was done was appalling. And I just think that they deserve some compensation.
But why necessarily? I just haven't got why necessarily from him. What is his connection to the
because
charity?
the Prince's Trust took over the charity and all its liabilities.
Okay.
So it's perfectly fair. And what gets me about the Prince's Trust is Charles never puts his hand in his pocket for anything. All he does is go out. And I remember during the foot and mouth crisis, and the Prince's Trust gave money, and the Daily Mail had stories saying the Prince gives money. No, it wasn't. It was the Prince's Trust. And people had given money to the Prince's Trust for one thing, and then found it going for foot and mouth. I mean, I mean, he's not the most generous of people.
Controversial. What do we think about that, David? Is King Charles not a generous?
Well, I've no reason to know whether he is or whether he isn't. But one thing is certain: he has a curious attitude sometimes to donations, taking donations for his charities from people he should really be avoiding. And I just think that he needs to take care to make sure that his charity does not get involved in things that they can't finish off. I mean, this is a terrible story. I mean, these people who are now at very old age were thought to be in line for £200,000 compensation, and they get £2,000.
Yeah.
And it's not really compensation for all they went through.
Of course not.
It's really, if I were the king having my marmalade and toast this morning, I would tell someone, we got to do something about this. That doesn't mean he will.
David, could I ask you something which is not down on our list to talk about, but front page of the Times, and we reflected it in the headlines there, the International Monetary Fund saying that this is no time to raise taxes. And is it a time to raise interest rates from the Bank of England? I'm simply bringing this to you that however small a reduction we have with inflation, people are being absolutely hit right, left and centre. And would extra interest rate rises, is it really helping us or hindering us?
No, in the longer term, it hinders. It only helps as a way of getting on top of these inflationary pressures. But I mean, it is a sign of failure on the part of the Treasury that they've had to adopt this, and that interest rates have gone up from 0.1% to 4.5% and possibly to 4.75% imminently over the space of a couple of years. This is bad, very bad. I think, so far as the Times are concerned, this is no time to cut taxes, the IMF. To hell with them.
Well, exactly. I mean, yesterday...
It's got nothing to do with them.
I mean, shouldn't we just stop listening to them? I mean,
I'd have
Scarlett,
a two-word
yesterday...
comment, and the second one is off.
Yesterday they heaped praise on the government and said they were doing well to help the country avoid recession. And this was, directly contradicting their prediction that we were the, poorest growing economy in the G7.
Well,
slowest growing.
I think we still are, actually. But I think the problem with the IMF is that when they say things that you like, you think, oh, well, yes, see, they were wrong last time. I mean, for all we know, is next week they're going to say something completely different. And so it's not that they just get it wrong over and over again, and they get it wrong whether we're doing well or doing badly.
How well or badly is Suella Braverman doing in the wake of the speeding row, Scarlett?
Okay, I find this it's really strange. Conservatives rally round Braverman in speeding round. I mean, she was a law officer and she broke the law. Now, when Harriet Harman was a law officer and she was caught speeding, she put out a press release saying that this is what happened and then paid the fine. Suella Braverman tried to hush it up. And actually, that's the whole problem. I mean, we all know that people speed. I have to say, Harriet said to me, do you think I should resign? I mean, Harriet took it really seriously. And I said, come on, it doesn't matter. And she said, no, I broke the law. And I think in both cases, it was accidental. I mean, I think a lot of people...
Well, you can speed at 24 miles an hour in London, can't you?
Exactly. Yes, I think... probably neither of them were doing that. And I mean, I've been done for speeding, but I just do not understand that the attitude is, well, let's see if I can get away with this. And then, you know, her special advisor says to the Mirror, no, she wasn't done for speeding.
Is that fair? I mean, there was no suggestion that she was trying to avoid paying the penalty in any way.
She was trying to avoid anybody finding out. Look, I think it's fine, but I think if you are a law officer and you were found...
Sorry, because she requested a one-on-one session, you think that was avoiding people trying to find out?
Yeah.
OK.
Well, she did ask for it quite a lot.
It's interesting that, because Mr Loophole, a gentleman I've never met, Mr Loophole says apparently it happens a lot.
Mr Loophole says it happens occasionally, and if she had asked him, he would have said no. He thinks no politician should have it privately.
What I find quite distressing is that someone can rise to the dizzy heights of being Home Secretary, and it is a very big job, having served as sort of right-hand person to a Home Secretary for 5 years. It's a big job, and that they are too stupid to realise that if you go round asking to have special treatment and, you know, to have to be able to wear a mask over your face or whatever she wanted to do, so you were not embarrassed by this. This has "leak me" written all over it, whatever document, right? And how stupid. And you keep thinking, I would prefer it if senior ministers in a government I loosely support had more intelligence than that, you know?
Okay. And integrity.
A quick one on Boris Johnson mocking France's President Macron.
Yes, I mean, Boris is obviously out and about doing all kinds of speeches, but he was in, or maybe still is for all I know, in Texas. And basically, I'm just looking to try and get... I need somebody, see, if this was properly funded, someone would be handing me the paper.
Sorry, I know.
They'd be down around my knees, handing me up this stuff, instead of me having to grope around like a sad old git. But anyway...
We enjoy it.
Yes, indeed, I know. It amuses you to mock old age. Anyway, as we were, yes. Basically, he was talking about Macron wanting Russia not to be humiliated and all the rest of it. And I think I know what he's saying, because, you see, the alliance between us, the Germans and the French, amongst others, and certainly the Italians, is very loose and not very firm in relation to what's happening with Putin. And I think what is coming out here is Johnson, you know, can't resist. There's a big crowd there. He's probably being very well paid for this. So he can mock Macron's accent. But at root of it, he's probably doing a good job in this regard. He's in America trying to tell the Americans that they cannot abandon this fight for freedom on the part of the Ukrainians. And there's a horrible statistic lurking somewhere in the middle of this, which says that a research organisation found this month that 79% of Republicans believe, quotes, we should pay less attention to problems overseas and concentrate on problems here at home. And both of the leading Republican candidates sign up to that. That's quite worrying,
yes,
actually.
Indeed.
Guys, we've got to leave it there. I'm sorry to say. David, thank you very much indeed. Scarlett, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for today's review of the papers.
The Chancellor has warned that food prices are still rising too fast, as the latest data shows food inflation at 19.1%.
OK, those figures were released just about 2 hours ago. They also showed that the UK's overall inflation rate has fallen to 8.7%. Good, but not good enough. Probably it is the lowest level in a year. Let's go to the Shadow Secretary for Equalities, Annalise Dodds. Annalise, very good morning to you. And Annalise, you want to talk about the British economy, and I know the Shadow Chancellor is in Washington talking about the same thing. But you guys have a vision how to restructure it, what would you put at the centre of a new British economy? Good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, yes, we do have that long-term plan for the UK's economy. We're determined that instead of our country going backwards, which so often it has over the last 13 years, we want our economy to be the most highly growing, have the most sustainable growth in all of the G7. We're determined to achieve that. And Rachel's setting out plans today on how she'll make sure that happens. Our Green Prosperity Plan, for example, also our industrial strategy working in partnership with business, our reforms to taxation, scrapping business rates, those measures would ensure that we have that high sustained growth that we desperately need, because without that sustained growth, we're not going to be seeing the increase in living standards that are so important for families up and down the country. People's living standards in our country have been stagnating or going backwards under the Conservatives. Labour would reverse that.
And some good news this morning in terms of the headline rate of inflation down out of double digits for the first time since August last year, 8.7%. The government very pleased about that. I wonder if, under Gordon Brown, you made the Bank of England independent. Lots of difficult questions being asked of the governor there yesterday about their management of inflation. Do you think they're doing a good job?
Well, it's really important, actually, that the Bank of England can do their job and do it independently. And we've seen many economic institutions being unfortunately undermined by the Conservatives over the last 13 years, whether we're talking about the Bank of England or we're talking about the Office for Budget Responsibility, the fiscal watchdog. We really need to be re-establishing our economic credibility, our economic security for the future. And that's what Rachel's focused on. The last time that we had a UK Chancellor in the United States, it was Kwarteng. He, of course, was recalled back to London to be sacked, and it was when the pound was tanking, when the mortgage crisis for British families was starting. Labour's got a very different approach, and it is based on rebuilding that economic credibility. That includes an independent Bank of England.
Right, here's a good one for you. Interest rate rise. Is it time to put the brakes on, or would you still agree that the Bank of England should go out there and raise those levels again to stop us all spending, which it's certainly doing?
Well, look, ultimately, that is a decision for the Bank of England. And I really think the big question for the Conservative government is why they're not taking action that is within their area to deliver, rather than perhaps criticising other institutions. Why aren't we seeing, for example, the Conservative government introducing a proper windfall tax? They could do that, use the proceeds from that to tackle the cost of living crisis. Why aren't we seeing them taking action on food prices? Almost going up by near 20% at the moment, a huge increase on people's weekly food shop, and yet no action coming from the Conservatives on this. Again, Labour set out actions we would be taking right now to be tackling that food price inflation. So, there's a huge amount that government should be focused on delivering right now. The Bank of England will deliver what's within its independent mandate. It's their decision what choices they take. But there's a lot the government could and should be doing that it's failing to do.
What about these fresh allegations about lockdown rules being broken by former Prime Minister Boris Johnson? Does it matter? We knew he broke rules before.
Well, I think what really matters here is the amount of taxpayer money that's going to fund Boris Johnson's legal bills, into the hundreds of thousands of pounds now. And yet, Rishi Sunak seems to be perfectly happy with this arrangement. He seems to be too weak to stand up to Boris Johnson over his legal bills. And of course, Boris Johnson's making a lot of money at the moment from different speech appearances, so surely he could pay his own legal bills. But we've seen the same pattern. We saw the same pattern with Dominic Raab, the same pattern, of course, with Suella Braverman when she broke security rules, and now other allegations about her behaviour. Rishi Sunak just seems to be too weak when it comes to those interests in his party, and he's not putting the interests of our country, and particularly British taxpayers, first.
I just want to ask you finally, before we let you go, about the situation in Cardiff, these riots on Monday night. A really confused picture about what happened. It certainly seems as though the Labour Police and Crime Commissioner was misinformed or deliberately misinformed people yesterday morning. It's not clear what happened when he said that there were no police involved in this incident where 2 teenagers died. Arguably, that prompted huge reaction from the crowds in Ely. What do you make of all of this?
I think the most important thing to say is just this is a dreadful, dreadful incident, and I think all of our sympathies would be with the families of the 2 young men who died. Absolutely horrendous situation for them, and I really think their interests should be put at the forefront here. You know, I'm sure there will be an investigation into what's taken place, but you know, I think especially for them, you know, it really is important that we talk about these issues soberly and that we understand what actually happened.
Labour's Annalise Dodds, thank you very much for your time today. We unfortunately are now out of time, so we've got to say goodbye to you, and I'm seeing it's quite a nice day down there in Westminster today, so the sun is shining. We're going to link to the weather right now, and we'll be back, and we're talking about the whole, what we were talking about with Annalise Dodds there, inflation, and particularly this food inflation figure. Why is it going down in the rest of the world, and why are we still paying too much? Food inflation is nearly 20% up on last year. Here's the weather.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So today we'll see plenty of sunny spells around, but also a bit of cloud sinking southwards as well. And that's due to this weather front that's just coming into the far northwest through today. But generally that settled weather will remain around as high pressure stays centred to the west of the UK. So through this morning, it was a bit of a chilly start in some rural areas, but plenty of clear spells will mean it's going to be another bright day across much of England and Wales, though it could just be a little chilly around the coast sometimes with an onshore breeze. Looking across Scotland and Northern Ireland, there's a bit more in the way of cloud here today, with some spits and spots of rain at times sinking southeastwards through the day. So temperatures not faring quite so well here as they are further south. 22-23 degrees Celsius as a high here for today. As we go through this afternoon, that cloud will start to sink its way further southwards, so bringing some overnight cloud to eastern and central parts of England and Wales. So it won't be quite a cold start here on Thursday as it was this morning, but across Northern Ireland and Scotland, with clearer skies through tonight and into Thursday morning, a cooler start here, though there will be a bit of a breeze, particularly around the far northern coasts. So to start Thursday morning, anywhere that has seen clear spells overnight will be bright to start. Further east, a little bit more in the way of cloud than what we'll have seen through this morning. But this will start to break up as we go through towards lunchtime on Thursday. And we could just see the odd shower popping up in a few places where we get some thicker cloud too. But a brighter day across Scotland and Northern Ireland than what we've seen of late, with plenty of sunny spells and temperatures just starting to rise here. The fine and settled weather isn't going anywhere anytime soon, though, as we go through the rest of the week and into the start of the weekend, with temperatures continuing to climb, especially across the south, where we could reach the low to mid-20s.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Dubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Chancellor warns food prices are still rising too fast, despite inflation falling to 8.7%.
Very good to have you on board. The time is 9 o'clock. It's a Wednesday morning, 24th of May. You're tuned into Breakfast on GB News. Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Food inflation remains high at 19.1%, according to the latest data, despite the overall figure falling to 8.7%. The Justice Secretary told us he was proud of the government's progress.
The overall news today is really, really promising, and it comes, of course, after the Bank of England upgraded the growth forecast for the UK up a full 0.7%, so that's very, very significant.
Boris Johnson has threatened to sue the government after it referred him to police over new allegations he broke lockdown rules. Investigators are looking into potential breaches at Downing Street and Chequers.
The Duchess of Edinburgh says she is deeply saddened by the death of a woman who was hit by a motorcycle that was part of her police escort. Helen Holland was struck in London on the 10th of May but died after sustaining irreversible damage to her brain.
Why did it take police in South Wales 24 hours to admit potential involvement in a fatal crash in Cardiff on Monday evening? The deaths of 2 teenagers sparked riots in the city. CCTV showing police following the victims minutes before the incident.
And the Prime Minister has warned that uncontrolled legal migration is leading to unmanageable pressure on public services. Writing in The Telegraph, Rishi Sunak says he's committed to bringing down immigration that's too high and too fast.
Thank you very much indeed for all your comments, all your observations this morning. GBviews at gbnews.com and tweet us at GBnews. we're all talking about financial figures for the past couple of hours because the Chancellor's warned that food prices are still rising too fast, as you will now see when we go through those figures. It shows food inflation 19.1%.
Yes, the Office for National Statistics also showed that the UK's overall inflation rate has now fallen to 8.7%. That is the lowest level in over a year.
And that doesn't mean to say you're not paying more. The level has fallen, but you're still paying more.
An increase, yeah.
Yeah, so the Secretary of State for Justice, he spoke to us this morning and he said the government still had lots more work to do.
The government is absolutely clear that it will do everything it can to work with the supermarkets to bring them down, to ensure that as the energy prices come down, and they've gone from something over 700p a therm down to around 70, that does feed through into prices. But the point I wanted to make is that overall, the fact that overall inflation is coming down, this means that the prospects of our economy are improving. So as I say, growth is up. The IMF forecasts, which were depressed, which were artificially low, were showing that the British economy is more resilient than people had bargained for.
OK, more reaction to this. Our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, he's had these figures for breakfast today. That's all he's had for breakfast.
Lunch and dinner to come.
My friend, you know, people will be saying, oh, look, the overall inflation rate, this is not bad at all, or whatever it is. But as I was pointing out, we're still 8.7 up on last year.
Yeah, the overall headline figure is pretty good. It shows, we can put them on a graphic here, it shows that inflation in April 2023 was 8.7%. That means, Eamonn and Isabel, that a basket of goods and services last month was 8.7% more expensive than in April 2022. So falling inflation doesn't mean lower prices, it means less of a rise. That inflation is down from 10.1% in March. This is the first time in 8 months we've been out of double-digit inflation. But this is really what's attracting attention, and rightly so, the price of food. Food price inflation last month was 19.1%, so your average basket of food almost a fifth more expensive than a year ago, and that food price inflation is only slightly down from March 2023 when it was 19.2%. This is a major problem for the government because poorer households spend disproportionately heavily on food, so that 19% food price inflation hits them really, really hard. No wonder the Treasury had this summit of food retailers yesterday, a bit of preemptive spin. It seems to me from the Treasury readout of that meeting that it wasn't as if there were harsh words exchanged. It seemed like a bit of a sort of group hug to me.
So what do they need to do? I mean, is there anything the Treasury can do to try and compel the supermarkets to cut these profits that they seem to be making at the expense of the
you made
public?
a very good point. You said, show us your books.
Show us your books.
You can't compel private companies to do certain things, but you can threaten and cajole. So the Competition and Markets Authority is apparently looming. They were mentioned at this meeting between the Treasury and the food retailers yesterday. Look, the food retailers, they're not here to defend themselves, we must say. They would deny there's any kind of price gouging or opportunistic price rises. I know a lot of farmers would say that there are, because farm gate prices have been pretty subdued.
In the Times, they're quoted after this meeting as having saying they're shouldering 80% of the increase in costs. And then we went to a farm in Northern Ireland. The farmer's going, mate, it's more than 80% on us.
There's lots of energy used in food processing and packaging, but energy prices are sharply down compared to this time last year. That's why headline inflation has come down.
Well, look, overall, the mood for the consumer, for all of us, what way is it going to feel over the next few months? We're seeing these inflation figures coming down. Food inflation, absolutely horrendous. Bank of England in the business where they may choose to increase interest rates again. We're getting battered and bruised from every angle.
The government's banging the drum. You just heard from a Justice Secretary there that things are getting better. We've turned the corner. The International Monetary Fund say we will avoid recession. But for the vast majority of people here in the UK, it doesn't feel like the cost of living crisis is easing much any time soon. And it now seems we're going to be hit with another interest rate rise next month on June the 22nd. The markets seem to think that's nailed on, given that this inflation number, even though it's down, it's not down as many people thought. And there's one other idea I just wanted to introduce into the discussion. forgive the jargon, but this is called core inflation. It's a measure of inflation that strips out things that go up and down a lot, like energy prices and food prices. And core inflation, which is really driven by sort of the underlying state of supply chains, by wage bargaining and so on. Core inflation actually went up in April from 6.2 to 6.8%. It's at a 31-year high. So whatever the government says, that is just hard evidence that this inflation problem has not gone away, and it may not go away anytime soon. Look, I do think the trajectory of headline figures is going to be down over the coming months, just because after the war in Ukraine in February 2022, everything went bananas. Prices went to the moon across energy and food markets. So there is a downward trajectory, but particularly for these necessities, food prices in particular, hard-pressed households are going to feel just as hard-pressed.
Well, I know you're not a financial advisor, but overall mood, if it came to buying a new car, taking a car out and hire
Asking
purchase,
for a friend.
when it came to changing house, you know, doing that sort of thing, I mean, I'm feeling, listening to all this, avoid unnecessary expenditure. Avoid it if you can avoid it. And that's the idea that it's supposed to do, isn't it? The interest rates on us.
I think the country is polarised quite heavily, Eamonn. Look, a lot of people, a lot of households made a lot of money during lockdown. They didn't have to commute. They were still getting paid. They stashed a lot of money away. Car sales, they're not where they were before the pandemic, but they are up over recent months. The housing market is far from collapsing. It's showing signs of life again. And yet, for lots of people, they're struggling. I think the real kind of the overall theme, the overall mood of the country at the moment is that the economy as a whole is pretty resilient, but there are real pockets, actually, of people who are struggling. And these headline inflation numbers, while they're good, belie the fact that underneath the surface, there's a lot of still quite worrying trends.
So the advice seems to be, you'll be OK if you don't eat. That's basically it.
Well, that's Liam with his assessment.
Unfortunately, I do.
Liam's assessment there of the mood of the country. One wonders what the mood of Boris Johnson is this morning. He is reportedly considering suing the government this time because civil servants have reported fresh allegations of breaching lockdown guidelines to police.
Thames Valley and Scotland Yard have confirmed they're looking into potential breaches which happened at Chequers and Downing Street.
Let's get the thoughts of our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. I mean, we know he's broken rules before. What's new?
Well, he's strongly denying that it's happened again. He says that it is totally untrue, these allegations. But as you say, two separate police forces now looking into potential breaches of rules by family members and friends at both Chequers and Downing Street. But I think it's the politics today that is interesting. That police investigation is clearly going to take some time, but it is clear Boris Johnson is angry and is angry with the government about all of this. One ally telling The Times this morning that there are a growing number of MPs who want the party leadership to act to stop these witch hunts, and a group of MPs will meet today to consider options. Meanwhile, members across the country are being organised, i.e. some of them, MPs, think that the government is either complicit in what they say is a witch hunt against people like Boris Johnson, maybe even Suella Braverman as well, right-wingers within the party, or at the very least are allowing it to happen. In fact, many have accused the government, senior ministers, of signing off the details of what potentially might have gone on to make it public to the Privileges Committee and to the two different police forces. Now, the government have denied that. They said that the senior ministers were not involved in the decisions about these referrals. But I think it is a sign, because kind of Boris Johnson had stepped back into the background somewhat, hadn't he, over the last 6 months or so, that he still carries some political risk for Rishi Sunak. It's going to be a very difficult balancing act for the Prime Minister over this issue. Clearly, he's going to stand back and say the police need to properly investigate, but there is politics involved in this. There are a lot of Boris Johnson supporters within the Conservative Party, and they can cause a hell of a lot of trouble.
Darren McCaffrey in Westminster with that. Thank you very much indeed.
South Wales police are facing serious questions after the riots in Cardiff that followed a crash that killed two teenagers on Monday evening.
Despite officers saying none of their vehicles were on the road at the time, CCTV has emerged from the area which appears to show a police van following two people on bikes minutes before the incident.
Well, let's go to Paul Hawkins, our reporter there this morning for us. And we see all the floral tributes behind you there, Paul. And really, we get the whole sense of shock and outrage there has been from that community.
Yeah, in the last few minutes, a car pulled up and two people who live in this community very, very angry with the police response, and they were just saying, look, you need to see the CCTV, this clip that's been circulated on social media, this clip of a police van. It's taken from what looks like a camera that's mounted on the side of a house, a police van that's chasing a bike. We think around about 30 miles an hour, the two vehicles are travelling, and it took place about just under a mile away from where we are at the moment, which is the scene of the accident, which just happened to my left on next to the sign, next to a lamppost, which has been completely covered in floral tributes. So the community still want to keep laying floral tributes, and actually there's quite a heated discussion going on over there in the background with some members of the community about what happened. But they've essentially been using this gate behind me. It says Harvey and Kyrie, paying tributes to the two people who died, Kyrie Sullivan, who's 16 years old, and Harvey Evans, who's 15 years old. Now, initially, as you say, Isabel, the police said that there was no police vehicles involved in a chase. That was then repeated by the Police and Crime Commissioner, Alan Michael, but then that CCTV emerged, and then we had this statement from South Wales Police late yesterday afternoon. Have a listen.
We can confirm that the following investigations have been carried out so far, and when the collision occurred, there were no police vehicles on Snowdon Road. A police vehicle in Grand Avenue responded to the report of a collision, attended the area, and officers performed CPR. The investigation has involved the studying of CCTV and tracking data from the police vehicle. At this stage, we do not believe any other vehicles were involved.
Yeah, so there were lots of questions thrown by reporters, but the police were batting them all away and just headed back into their office. Now, this morning, Alan Michael, the South Wales Police and Crime Commissioner, has said, I was assured, and I'm still assured, that the youths were not being chased by the police at the time of the road traffic accident. Essentially, he's doubling down. But the police themselves, and this is routine, they've referred themselves to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. They are sending investigators to the scene to decide whether an investigation needs to take place. But essentially what is happening here is rising anger with the police, falling levels of trust, lots of questions, and not enough answers at the moment.
OK, well explained, Paul. Thanks very much indeed.
So many stories today about lack of trust with the police, and maybe Paul or maybe Andrew and Beverly will be talking about that later. We'll find out very shortly. The time now, 9:15.
Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. An 18-year-old man will appear in court after recording prank videos of entering people's homes in London without permission. Bakari Bronze Agaro was charged last night after failing to comply with the community protection notice.
Buckingham Palace says the Duchess of Edinburgh is deeply saddened by the news that a woman has died after being hit by a motorcycle, which was part of the Duchess's police escort. She was 81-year-old great-grandmother Helen Holland, and she was struck in London on the 10th of May, but died after sustaining irreversible damage to her brain. We understand the Duchess will be in touch privately with Miss Holland's family.
Police in Portugal investigating the disappearance of Madeleine McCann are continuing their targeted search of a reservoir today. The site is 30 miles from where the 3-year-old went missing in 2007.
"15 minutes away from Bev and Andrew. What have you got, guys?"
Boris, is such a huge story. I mean, this potentially risks triggering a civil war, in my view, because is it necessary? This is following just a few days after the Home Secretary, who's on the right of the party, being hung out to dry by the Prime Minister. He still hasn't decided whether she broke the rules or didn't. It's not rocket science, is it, really? And Boris's people think he's been monumentally stitched up. That's what they think. And he was going about his business, but another baby on the way, in America earning money, and now this has brought him back to the fore. The whole privileges investigation into Partygate is going to be delayed by this. Rishi Sunak's stirring up big problems here.
Okay, well, let us know your thoughts. GBviews at gbnews.com or tweet at gbnews.
Stay with us. We're going to be talking to two former senior prison officers who are helping ex-offenders get a fresh and get back to work. Next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
(21:09). A very good morning to you. Hope your day's going well.
Now, the TV personality Fred Syria has launched his charity's third restaurant staffed by prisoners.
Right, co-founders of the charity are two senior prison officers at HMP Leeds, and they're helping ex-offenders start over and get back to work. How important is that? Let's talk to them. Steve Freer and Val Vavrosh. Steve and Val, thanks very much indeed. Good work you're doing.
Eamonn, good morning. First of all, I just have to correct you. We're not co-founders of that charity. We're
okay, yeah, it all gets a bit complicated. So what I do know is that so you are former prison officers, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
So tell people what you are doing and who with then.
Okay, so our background, we both did 30 years working in prisons, some of the toughest prisons in the UK, including Wormwood Scrubs and Leeds. And there was a clear gap out there in terms of giving people with convictions employment. The barrier and the stigma was just too great a barrier. We decided to do something about that, and with our expertise of prisons and prisoners, we've now placed over 800 people into, and I stress the word, sustainable employment.
Everyone benefits from that, don't they? Because, you know, if you have prisoners that don't reintegrate into society, they're more likely to fall back into offending. But if you help them get back on their feet and to have some dignity, the chances are a bit of rehabilitation will take place.
Well, I think viewers need to understand that probably 80% of people that land in prison is down to society's failure to deal with poverty. There is a phrase, poverty is the parent of crime. Aristotle, you know, back in the day they saw that, and yet we seem to ignore it.
I think the most important statistic from the 800 that we've placed is the one that we're really proud of, is that only 33 of those 800 have actually returned to custody within a 2-year period. Now, the national stats are that 45% reoffend within 12 months and up to 64% reoffend within 2 years. Ours is 4%. The key to that success is that we provide expert support for those lads once they leave prison. And that's by ex-prison officer mainly led. And that's the key to it. The support, it's not just about placing them into work, it's about keeping them in them jobs and then them becoming self-sufficient.
The wins from this, as you said, you've less crime, less victims, more people paying into the system, tax and insurance, less people on benefits, great role models for the children, intergenerational change.
The savings to the economy, it costs £48,000 a year to keep someone in custody for a year.
You can send somebody to Eaton for that.
And it also cost in 2019, it cost this country 18.5 billion, I think it was, just for reoffending alone.
Now you I mean, you were giving us the figures there, quoting the statistics, but also, Val, you must have seen the esteem within these offenders. You must see a difference just as human beings, that they change.
Without a doubt. I was in Leeds prison yesterday, Eamonn, and lads were coming up to me and saying, because we've sent a little promotional video in there and a lot of lads have seen it, coming up to me, Val, you run this charity getting people into work, don't you? Can you give me a card, please? The look on the face, there was hope back in the faces.
For the first time.
For the first time, because they feel hopeless when they're in prison, because they can't see into the future, because they know that when they get out, they can't get a job unless someone like us gets them and brokers that job.
The beauty of it is, when you do give them a job, you start to believe in them, and nobody's ever believed in these people.
Yeah.
1 in 4 come through the care system. They don't know what love is. Imagine that as a child.
Well, but Stephen, Val, thank goodness there are people like you who have the trust of these prisoners, and they have belief in you and you have belief in them. I'm sorry we haven't got more time to talk, but we'll say thank you for what you're doing and goodbye to you this morning.
Well, thanks to our employers as well, by the way.
Thank you, Eamonn.
Wouldn't mind seeing their menu.
I'll tell you what, you know, we do so many negative news stories. It's the nature of news, isn't it? And to cover stories like that, really uplifting and a lovely note to finish on.
Lovely note to finish on. But before we finish, are you going to phone me and tell me what you're wearing tomorrow?
No, I'm going to test your Mystic Meg tendencies.
Psychic abilities.
I think I know what colour I'm going to wear.
Psychic abilities. Two psychic ability people, Andrew and Bev. To the point. See you in the morning.
We're both in blue.
Oh,
Psychic.
yeah.
Mystic Meg, Mystic Andrew, Mystic Bev.
Somebody who is going to be on the edge of his bed this morning, I imagine, Boris Johnson, because he's in all sorts of trouble again because of lockdowns. Can you believe that? It's ridiculous, isn't it?
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by these